All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Why Read. And this is episode 5 now. And thank you so much for joining us. I am here joined by Angela from Do Unicorns
Hello.
Read and from Matt on Books.
Hi.
So, hello. I have not gotten a chance to talk with Angela live before yet. I got the
No.
wonderful chance to talk with Matt over on his channel for Matt on Friends, which is a fantastic
Friends
series.
on Books.
Oh, Friends on the Book books. Thank you. And so definitely check that out though, that series. He's going to be having some other lovely booktubers on there tomorrow. I understand you're having
Theo from Rekindled Reader, Alex from Tall Guy Reads, and Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads.
all wonderful, wonderful channels. So definitely tune in. And then, so I guess we'll just go ahead and start with Angela. It's so lovely to meet you through live
Indeed,
chat.
it's great.
Yay.
Great to finally interact with somebody, who I got lovely comments from in my comment section, and I'm in your comment section, and finally we can actually talk. Great.
Oh, well, I'm so glad. And I have to say that I really think that Angela's channel is just one of the most undersubscribed channels that I've come across because her analysis videos are so good. They're so thoughtful, they're so
Oh,
thought
thank you.
provoking. Especially if you're reading Malazan Book of the Fallen, then you definitely want to check those out. And we're probably going to be talking about Malazan a little bit in this video because Matt is a Malazan veteran. He's read through the series once. He read it through it. Actually, I know your story with Malazan, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But I know Angela's reading it right now. She's in Midnight Tides right now. Is that right?
Almost. I have just about started. So I think 30 pages in or something like that. So yeah. But yeah, Midnight Tides just started.
It
And
has,
Almost halfway.
I just finished my reread of Midnight Tides like 2
Okay.
days ago.
Right. Great.
So
oh,
good
perfect.
timing.
Wow.
Perfect.
Wow.
Yay.
Yeah.
So I guess we can go ahead and start with our official question, which is why read? And so Angela, why don't you start off for us and tell us this question is more rooted in, what purpose reading is serving for you right now in your life and how you're using that question, how you relate to that question.
Yeah, okay. I think there are several reasons why I read. I mean, obviously for entertainment, no, just to pass time and have a good time. So entertainment reasons. I used to read professionally for almost 30 years. I was a lecturer for literature, so you have to read a lot of stuff. Whereas now, at the moment, I can just read at my leisure, and this is what I'm mostly doing. Um, I also read to keep in touch with, let's say, my cultural heritage. So I'm originally from Germany, but my family on my mother's side is from Poland. And I grew up actually with my grandparents and was speaking Polish. So I grew up bilingual. So I do read books in other languages than just English. So only English books feature on my channel, but I do read stuff that unfortunately might not be translated and will not feature on the channel in either Polish or German. So I use it to keep in touch with cultures. And yeah, I suppose also a self-care in a way.
Yeah, I mean, all valid reasons here.
Yeah, I hope so.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, fantastic. And Matt,
I
what
was
about
I was actually I was actually suggesting to Joanna that we do this whole thing in German
Oh no.
because
Of course. Warum
Angela
nicht?
is German. I live in Berlin. I speak fluent German, but that would basically
What,
just
what,
be
what,
Angela and I
yeah, what do
talking
we
to
do
each
with
other.
poor Joanna? Like,
Yeah,
Jawohl.
and everybody else, in the chat
Wie
probably as
geht's?
well. So
unless Matt, you want to play kind of like simultaneous interpreter, then sure, we can do that.
I've done that for people before, but it's not fun. Gives me
No, it's
headaches.
not fun, isn't it? No, it's
Yeah,
very stressful
yeah,
actually to be
yeah.
doing that. Yeah.
It's very tiring. Yeah.
I am just notoriously terrible with languages. I did take a couple of semesters of German. I took German in high school and I took German in college. I took a semester of French. I grew up in a bilingual household. I grew up actually in a Hispanic household. My
Okay.
parents were both they were both Spanish speakers for before they were English speakers. and yet they still speak Spanish around me all the time, and I just cannot seem to absorb it. And I don't know why. I don't know what my problem is, but that's
Yeah, I
pretty
think brains are just different. Some kids just take to it. Others, you can have all the best intentions of raising them bilingual, and it just won't happen. It's just like that.
Yeah, I always think that part of the issue too was they taught me English as my first language, and I feel like if they had taught me Spanish as my first language, I would have had to have learned English in order to participate in school. It would have been a struggle, but I
Yeah.
would have had to have learned it. But
It's a
yeah.
very,
In my
it's a
case, there
very
was no-
American. Go ahead.
Yeah. In my case, there was no differentiation, kind like nobody said this is the preferred language or this is the first language. It was just inside of the house, they spoke Polish. Outside of the house, everybody spoke German. There was like a, how shall I say, almost like a demarcation line. Like there were certain neighbors who were also from Poland, then you would speak Polish with them. And then after a couple of meters, you would just switch, no? So I never had this feeling that there was a preference for one language or the other in a way.
It's a very American immigrant thing.
Yeah.
I noticed that in like living in Germany, living in Europe, immigrants primarily speak their own language, and then they speak German to get by. Whereas in America, like my grandfather, like this, I was born in America. My grandfather was Puerto Rican. My grandmother was Hungarian. And nobody ever spoke either of those languages ever.
Right.
I never heard them. I never heard Spanish. I never heard Hungarian. And it's kind of, I find it kind of sad. I would love to be someone who could speak English, Hungarian, Spanish, and German, but I just like Hungarian and Spanish weren't a thing in our family at all.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, there used to be a time too when I could, like, if you gave me a line of Spanish to read, I could speak it with perfect pronunciation. There was a time when I could do that. I can't do that anymore. Nowadays, when I try to read Spanish, I get the accents all wrong. Living in the South, I guess, for a while now, it's just destroyed my ability to even speak it well. So
I went back to Australia. Like I lived in Germany for many years, and I went back to Australia for 6 years, came back to Germany, and it really took a month or two, even though I was fluent in German, it really took a month or two to get it back that I could think quickly enough that I could construct a sentence. And, you know, like other languages are hard.
yeah. And
Sometimes.
I've sung in other languages. I've sung in German, and I love.
What have you sung in German?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I sung a lot of Bach.
Give us an example.
Oh, I'm not going to do it now.
Oh, come on.
I'm not going to sing in German now.
Everybody in the chat, put in there that you want Joanna to sing.
Exactly.
But
Come
I
on,
did
little
sing,
Bach sonata. Come
okay.
on.
I loved, I still remember though, there was a Bach choral piece that I sang when I was 14, Wir eilen mit Schwachen, and I don't remember many of the words other than that. I knew all the words for a long time. And then I sang, in college, I sang Mahler's Kindertotenlieder, which is the songs on the death of children, which are, they're so beautiful and so sad. They're the most heartbreaking pieces ever. And this one, and I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher my pronunciation on this, but Lieder eines fahrenden Gesellen. So,
yeah.
Angela's like, what did you say? Yeah, and those are songs of the Wayfarer by Mahler, and that's also just a gorgeous song cycle. It was probably not right for my voice type either of those song cycles, but I just love the music so much I just had to sing them. And I did take the time when I was learning them to learn every single word I was singing and understand everything I was singing. But yeah, language is something, if you don't practice it, it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah. If you don't use it, you lose it. That's right.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Why I read subtitle? Why is it? Fantastic. So yeah, going back to our Malazan discussion, I actually brought up just because I knew we're all Malazan lovers here, I think, so far. And Angela, how did you find out about Malazan? I wanted to hear more about your journey with that.
I blame Dr. Fantasy.
Herr Professor Doctor.
Oh,
Professor,
yeah,
Doctor.
okay.
Yeah, Professor Doctor.
Yeah, Herr Professor Dr. Fantasy. When I watched his very first video, hi Philipp.
Speaking of the person.
Obviously, ja, wir sprechen jetzt auch Deutsch, Philipp. Ist alles gut.
Ja, immer für die nächsten 2 Stunden.
Yeah, so I was doing all those menial tasks in my studio, like cleaning the palette, which I hate doing, and I wanted background entertainment. So I thought, okay, let's see what YouTube has to offer. And one of the things that came up was one of Philip's videos, and it was the one, I don't know, my 10 best or fantasy series or whatever, but it's the one where he at the end declares that Tolkien baptized his imagination and Erikson or Malazan set it free. And I've
the
never heard
famous
about Erikson
chaseism.
or Malazan. And I was standing there and thinking to myself, first of all, who's this guy? Secondly, did he just really say this? And then thirdly, what's this Malazan thing he's constantly on about? So I looked it up because there aren't many people in the world who have read stuff that I've never heard of. So I was kind of like, wow, okay. So I looked it up and then I was like, yeah, sounds interesting, maybe, okay. And when he then started the series with AP, where they were kind of like reading all the Malazan books, I watched a couple of those videos and then after a while I thought, okay, maybe I should start reading this. And then eventually picked up Gardens of the Moon. And the rest is history. Here I am with a BookTube channel, not just reading Malazan, but making Malazan videos. That's how I found Malazan and how I started reading Malazan.
I think that Philip's line about Tolkien baptized my imagination and Malazan set it free, I think that's the most quoted line on all of BookTube of a booktuber, on all of BookTube. I've heard people quote that line.
It's a great line now. I mean,
I'm getting tired of it.
Yeah.
Philip, you're going to have to let us know if you just spontaneously came up with that, or did you think that before you did the video? I'm just curious.
I'm sure he wrote
thinking
like
about
10
this
drafts.
for years, probably. Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. It's a great line.
I actually had to rewind the video because the first time around I thought, what? No, he didn't say that, did he? But yeah, he did. So,
it's a great line. It's a wonderful line. And I actually feel like I understand it because at the time I watched that video, it's kind of embarrassing, but I hadn't read The Lord of the Rings all the way through. I had started it so many times throughout my life and just never finished it. But I was determined to finish it around that time, I think, if I'm not mistaken on the timeline. And I hadn't finished Malazan Book of the Fallen at the time. But I finished Lord of the Rings when I was about halfway through Malazan Book of the Fallen. And I remember being so emotional by the end of The Lord of the Rings for so many reasons. But I was so emotional over that ending that I thought, how is that possible? How could Malazan beat this at this point? Like, I don't know. I'm loving Malazan Book of the Fallen. I don't know if it could possibly surpass this, though. And then I finished The Crippled God. And I feel like I get it. I think I get what Philip was meaning with that. I'm sorry, Philip, for making this all about your
I'm constantly promised that when I finish Malazan, when I read the Crippled God, it will blow me away. So we'll see.
Yeah. Oh, it's so, I can't say anything, but I cannot wait. I cannot wait. I get so excited every time I'm watching somebody's journey through that series because I don't know.
It's one of those series. I mean, I think it's fair to say that it can be pretty difficult for a lot of people. And I think a lot of it is it's very unexpected. Yeah. Because it's in many ways, it's very different than a lot of other fantasy. And pretty much everybody I know who is a Malazan fan always is like, oh, you're starting Malazan? Oh, cool. You know, everybody gets really excited to see somebody else experience it for the first time. I saw a guy on Twitter yesterday posted something and he had just finished Gardens of the Moon. And that's always kind of a tipping point. You know, I know a lot of people who said, fuck this Gardens of the Moon. I didn't get anything. I didn't understand it. It's horrible. I'm out. And this guy was like, oh my God, I have to start the next book immediately. And you're always like, yes.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean something, because I love Gardens of the Moon, still do. Had the feeling afterwards, I want to reread this straight away. Then I read Dead House Gates, and I was like, okay, that's it. I don't think I continue with this, no, because I found Dead House Gates just horrible.
I DNF'd.
So
I DNF'd Gardens of the Moon twice
yeah, okay.
over like a 10 or 12 year period. You know, I think I read it when it came out, and I was like, yeah, no, it just wasn't into it. And then 8, 10, 12 years later, I tried again and was like, nah. And then it was on my bookshelf during the pandemic, and I was like, okay, I've got nothing else to do right now. So I read it, and then I was about halfway through, and I ordered the other 9 and read all of them in 2-3 months.
That's just mind blowing that you did it so fast. I still can't believe it.
It was the conditions. Like
Yeah.
I literally had nothing else to do. I was suddenly unexpectedly single. I was suddenly unexpectedly unemployed, and it was in the middle of a lockdown. So there was literally nothing else to do.
Okay, so that's the ideal Melassen conditions.
I can kind of buy that, because during lockdown, I was up to reading 3 hours a day. And part of that was just because of lockdown. And second, I also got an injury at the time, and I just couldn't do anything else. So I can kind of believe it when you put it that way. But still, that's amazing. And by the way, Angela, I had a very similar experience. I wouldn't say I hated Dead House Gates, but I really struggled through it. I loved Gardens of the Moon. And I know that's very unpopular. I loved Gardens of the Moon, though. It was just so different for me. It was so unlike anything I had ever read before. And then when I finished it, I actually felt like I could have gone back and reread the whole thing, just like you said, exactly like you said. And then I read Dead House Gates, and I didn't know anything about the series at the time. I didn't know it was even 10 books or anything. I didn't expect to be on a whole new continent with a whole new cast of characters. And I struggled. I really struggled getting into Dead House Gates. I did love the ending, but I didn't know if it was enough for me to want to continue. And then it wasn't until months later, I think it was because of a couple of videos I watched, that I looked back at that book, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I was like, for a book I didn't really enjoy that much, I keep thinking about it. I just can't stop thinking about these characters and what happened. And so I felt like I had to move on. So I did finally continue on. But that's interesting to hear you say that, because I feel like I haven't heard anybody else have that exact experience.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I found parts in Dead House Gates quite triggering, especially this whole kind like chain of dogs scenario, not this refugee track. We're kind of like with them and not tracking along. And part of this is like how my grandparents, for example, got out of Poland. No, so they were in a similar track and not just trying to get out, just trying to get away. And I found this quite triggering. So, I mean, I always say I cried an ocean over Dead House Gates. And I just afterwards, I just needed a break from this. I just needed a rest. No. So funnily enough, I mean, I read Melassen and also Erikson's stuff completely out of order. I think the next thing was a Bokelin and Corbel Broach novella, because AP and Philip were talking about this, and I thought, I want to have at least half of a chance to follow what they're talking about. And this is a short thing. Hey, I just read this. And then the God's Not Willing came out. So I thought, yeah, okay, why not? And I have to say, I love the God Is Not Willing. It's really fabulous book. And I thought, maybe Erikson is not just so bad after all. But what really kind like swayed me was this sci-fi thing he's written, Rejoice. Because it's Melassen, but in reverse in a way. No, so there are scenarios that are exactly like Melassen, but it's a world that's constructed in a way that there can't be any violence. And I thought, okay, after all this horrible stuff in Dead House Gates, so he's obviously able to write in a totally different mode, so to say. And somehow I found that very convincing for me to say, okay, I give Memories of Ice a try. And Memories of Ice I found really, really wonderful. So
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to try to read Rejoice. I know that Raph has a video on that, and he even says here, Rejoice is the key to the Malazan Book of the Fallen.
yeah.
Yeah, I do want to read that book, and I was going to try to squeeze it in a couple of months ago before meeting with Stephen Erickson on Steve's channel, but it just didn't work out. I do want to read it though eventually. I will get to it at some point.
Highly
Yeah.
recommend, because as I say, I would agree a little bit with Raf there. And it will give you a different perspective on Malazan, because the problems are very, very similar, but the scenario is very, very different. So, yeah.
Well, it's good to sometimes explore some of those questions and themes in a different context, or a different genre for that matter.
Definitely, yeah.
So it seems like we have a question here. Wait, where was it? Sorry.
Scarecrow.
Hi guys, I never grew up reading. I'm 20 and it's very hard for me to read even short ones, let alone 900-page books. Everyone I see says they read since they were kids, but I never had that. Any advice? What would you two say?
I'd say it's funny. There was a discussion on one of the Discords recently about long books and people having like, I can't do long books. And I always think if you can read a 200-page book, and if you read 2 of those, you've read a 400-page book. And if you read 2 of those, you've read an 800-page book. So, I mean, it's, in a way, to me, it's just a concept. Like you're just thinking, oh my God, this is a really big book. But if you think of it as 4 small books, maybe that helps. Maybe even mark in the book, like you could put a little tab in the book and say, okay, this is 200 pages. I'm just going to read that first, you know, and just to get over that concept of, oh my God, this is a huge book. I mean, I guess the other thing with a long book is the commitment. But if it's good, why not commit to a 1,000-page book? It's like reading 4 really good 250-page books. I mean, you know.
Yeah, you could look at it like Lord of the Rings, because Lord of the Rings is apparently one story divided up into 3 books, but then there are 2 books within each of those 3 books. So you could just say, I'm reading one book in the Fellowship of the Ring, and then read the second book in the Fellowship of the Ring eventually.
Yeah. Also can make it a habit. Not read just maybe 20 pages every day, and by the end of the month, you're almost through the book.
Yeah, I did it I made it a habit in my life by reading like 5 minutes a day, or even just a couple of pages a day. And that's perfectly fine.
That's a thing I've been actively trying to block from my mind, is reading speed and reading amount. Yeah. You know, because especially like you start a BookTube channel, I haven't been doing this that long. And I start looking around and there are people like doing their monthly wrap-ups and they're like, I read 12 books. You're like, what? Is there something wrong with me? I read 3 or 4 books a month.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like in a good month, I might get 5 done if 2 of them were small, you know? I mean, I do not read that fast. And then I saw Mike from Mike's book reviews and he was like, yeah, I also read like around 4 or 5. And I think that's great advice. Like just say X number of pages or X number of minutes. I'm going to find the time to do that every day. And after a while, you realize in 15 minutes, you're reading 5 more pages than you used to, or 10 more pages. It's just a question of practice, you know?
Yeah. Just making it a habit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, like Scarecrow said that they weren't brought up reading. I started reading on my own books, I don't know, when I was 5 or 6. And then you get practice just continually for the rest of your life. And if you haven't got that already, then you need to start the practice now. So, you know, just a little bit every day.
Yeah. I think there's also, I mean, I really personally don't like this culture. Now, when you say people doing wrap-ups where they say, oh, I read 12 books, 15 books or whatever. I'm personally a very slow reader as well, because I like to think about what I read, and that just takes time. So yeah, 3-4 books a month would be max for me as well. And I think also, quality, not quantity. I want to, as I say, for me, it's more important the experience of reading than how many pages I read. So
that was actually the whole inspiration of creating this Why Read series. Because I
okay.
feel like that. Because I feel like I keep saying this in every episode, but I'm sorry, I'm so redundant. But it's just that I feel like it's easy, even though I'm proud of myself for making reading a part of my life, making it a part of my routine, something I do every day.
Mm.
I don't want to lose sight of why this is meaningful and not get
Yeah.
so caught up in the numbers, because it's really easy to do that, especially if you have a channel.
The numbers, the numbers and the reading challenges and the all of that stuff is only exists to sell books. It doesn't exist to enjoy books. You know, I mean, I know people who read 15 books a month, and hopefully they enjoy all of them. But I can't imagine I could enjoy all of them if I was reading that many. I had exactly the same experience as what Angela said with Dead House Gates on the second read. I immediately picked up the next book, and I got about 10 pages into it. Not the next book of Malazan, because I've got this sort of Malazan, not Malazan, Malazan, not Malazan rhythm going. I forget what it was. I picked up the next book, and I got about 10 pages into it, and I was like, no. After Dead House Gates, I can't do another book right now. I just took a week off. I was like, I give myself permission for at least a week to not read anything and just to think about what I've just gone through. It feels like almost a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
It's a great book. Don't get me wrong. I think everyone should read it, and it's amazing. But it's rough. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot to process in that book. A lot.
Yeah.
It took me 6 months, and 6 months later, I was like, oh, wow, there's a lot that happened in that book. I'm still thinking about. Like, it's
in a lot of them. I mean, Midnight Tides, I would say, is not quite as traumatic as Dead House Gates, but I just finished Midnight Tides, and I was like, yeah, some of that stuff's pretty heavy. It's like some really big shit happened in there, and maybe I just sort of think about it a little, let it process, you know?
I love that. Yeah, it's fascinating how that works. Yeah, I only read 3 books. Spoiler alert for my next wrap up. I only read 3 books really in the month of November. I finished one on November 1st, so you could say 4, but I read a Baker book, and that took a lot of bandwidth for me. The second book, The Warrior Prophet. And then I also read a rather short book, Augustus by John Williams, historical fiction about the Emperor Augustus, but it was fantastic, and I loved both books, but both of them felt like books I needed to sit with a bit and take my time with. And I don't think I could get the same experience out of, I don't know. I don't like to rush either. I don't know. I can't, I'm physically incapable of it. I've tried all those speed reading techniques of, try to not read every word and try to read, not from the between the lines. I don't know, or use a pen. I've tried everything. I can't do it. It doesn't work. I'm like disabled from reading fast.
Especially reading fiction should not be, I mean, like if you have to read a lot for work, then I would really practice speed reading, because the stuff I read for work is boring. And you can skim a lot of it and get the point, know, but if you're reading fiction, I don't see the point of reading, like trying hard to read faster, that doesn't interest me at all. Actually, it's funny, since I started the BookTube channel, and I've been talking to people like Herr Professor Dr. Fantasy, Philip Chase, and AP, I've actually started reading slower.
Yeah.
I've started consciously, because I will usually just race through a book. If it's good and I'm into it, it just flows, and I'll just keep going until it's done. And now I've been like, at the end of every chapter, I'll actually put it down and like think about it. What were the themes that were coming up, and what kind of things were happening with the characters, and how was it written? And I used to never think about that stuff. So
it's funny you say that, because I feel the same way, especially when I watch them, any booktuber slow down and close read a text and talk about certain themes and certain things happening. It makes me want to slow down. So actually, I think that's kind of the content I gravitate. I love all types of booktubers and booktube, and I have no problem with people who love to read a lot. And I think, more power to you if you're somebody who could read 12 books a month or more. But I get really inspired personally, not so much by people who can read 1,000 times more books than I can, I get really inspired when somebody makes me want to slow down and savor a text. That is a really inspiring thing. Yeah.
Mr. Roycroft towards the bottom has an interesting comment.
Sorry,
from
I'm
the
so behind on the chat.
author's
everybody.
perspective. He'd rather hear that people thought about his book than that they finish quickly. Which,
Yeah.
yeah, of course, as an author. But yeah, no, I'm starting to think a lot more about books than I used to.
Yeah, that's
I'm not
interesting.
enjoying them less, you know.
I know Janie Wirtz has said that. Janie Wirtz has said that about her books too. She's told me actually on both times I've been on chats with her, she has said, I have written my books intentionally in such a way that makes the reader slow down. Like that's the experience she wants. And she said she did that intentionally because she believes that some of the most rewarding, beautiful experiences that we have in life happen when we actually slow down. I don't know if that's always 100% true about everything, you know. Sometimes a fast-paced roller coaster or something can be fun, but there is something to be said about that experience that I think in our culture today, we don't really take the time to appreciate.
When
Yeah,
the first time I read Robin Hobb, I thought, damn, this woman really doesn't want me to read fast. Like just the way she writes it, you have to pay attention, and you have to, and I at least had to sometimes like read a paragraph and then go back to the front, start reading the paragraph again. You know, her books reward slow reading. Yeah.
Yeah, she has a very beautiful prose as well. It's really almost lyrical in parts. So
Yeah.
And I also think analysis just takes time. No, if you want to focus on a character or how a character is built or something like that, you need to take the time for that. No, that just doesn't happen by itself by skimming through a book.
Yeah. That's it's interesting too with Robin Hobb. I remember when I read Assassin's Apprentice earlier this year, I actually had that thought. I'm like, I feel like I'm just being carried down a slow moving creek or stream. And I don't need to rush. And I liked that. I liked that she didn't feel like she needed to rush me through her story.
Yep.
And a lot of people take issue with that. They want to get to the beats of the story really as fast as possible.
Yeah, I mean, if you want a roller coaster, action-filled adventure, that's Robin Hobb's not the person for you. But everyone should read her. I actually made the commitment today. I recorded some videos today, and one of them was my TBR for next year. And I've got my Malazan everything, 28 books plus whatever comes after that. I'm rereading or reading all of them. And we've got the Song of Ice and Fire reread, or for me, reread coming up starting in January, which a lot of people are excited about. And then I was like, recently I was watching a video from Josh, Red Fury Books.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a panel discussion with a few different people about Realm of the Elderlings. And I was watching it, and then I was like, I don't own any of those physically. I've read most of them, not all of them, but I was watching the video, and then I was like, damn it. I pulled up my book depository and I ordered all of them, including the 2 novellas. And next year I may only be doing rereads.
Wow. That sounds fun.
Yeah, the FOMO is gonna kill me.
Yeah.
I'm going to be constantly watching videos on your channels and everybody else's channels about the new hot thing, and I'll be like, I'm committed to. But if anybody wants to do a read along of Realm of the Elderlings,
we could join in when I get to
really cool.
Live Ship Traders, because I don't have any. Yeah, I keep putting off Live Ship Traders.
So how much you've only read Farseer?
I've only read Farseer. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, so that's only January, February, March. So in April you could join me with Live Ship.
Possibly, yeah. If I'm not too bogged down, I'm trying to be really careful about not overcommitting with with things, because I'm also reading the Wars of Light and Shadow, and I'm reading the Song of Ice and Fire series, and I've got a Shogun read along I'm part of in January. I think that's going to be still happening, and so I'm trying to be really careful. And you and I talked at one point. I'll remind you, Matt. We talked about Long Price Quartet. I don't know if you already forgot.
I just bought it.
Yay!
I just bought
Did
it.
you really?
Yeah. And it actually was a really funny experience. Recently, a guy that I've known for like in real normal Berlin life that I've known for years, but he's kind of a friend of a friend. We've never really hung out. He recently was like, hey, why don't we do something together? And then he came over the other night. We were sitting there drinking and chatting. And I didn't know. He loves fantasy books. He's read Malazan. And I was like, okay, so what's like your top 3 fantasy books? And he was like, oh, definitely at the top is Long Price Quartet. I was like, fuck off. Really? Okay, I know one guy on YouTube who talks about it all the time, Alan. But I've never, otherwise I'd never heard of it, right? I'd never heard of Long Price Quartet before someone on BookTube mentioned it, you know, and recently just spontaneously I was like, oh, damn it, I'm gonna get that. So yeah, we could definitely do that.
Yeah. And I would take that slowly too, since you can, you know, it is technically 4 books. You could probably spread that out a bit. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's so cool. So, and you've read it before, right, Angela? You read it.
I've read Long Price Quartet. Yes, I finished that just before I started the channel, so it missed the channel just about to be covered there. Yeah, but I love it. It's really, really great. Yeah, I think Daniel Abrahams is absolutely wonderful when it comes to creating atmosphere. Like the settings are just fabulous. And this whole concept that's holding those books together, not what's the price for basically life and our relationships and so on. No? So yeah.
It sounds really, really good.
It does. It sounds like a slow burn too.
Yes, it is. It is a bit of a slow burn. Also, even though we follow the same characters, but I think it's 15 years between each of the books. So each book jumps ahead in time, then another 15 years. So we start with the characters as, teenagers, kind of like that age, and then end with them when they're in their 60s almost. No, so it's very interesting from that point of view as well.
Just quickly, because he commented, Vaughn, I would love to do a read along with you and other people. So if you're into it, I'm planning on reading Assassin's Apprentice in January. So let me know.
Yay, that'd be fantastic.
And anybody else. And then you could join in April-ish if we keep up to one a month. I mean, it's considering my reading speed, I'm a little afraid of like failing in the first couple of months, because I've decided I'm not going to do one Malazan book, one other book, one Malazan book. I'm going to do one Malazan book a month, one A Song of Ice and Fire a month, one Realm of the Elderlings a month. And then if I've got space for something else, I'll stick something else in there. So that'll be my schedule to start with anyway.
Yay. Wow. That sounds fun. Sounds
I've been reading Fire and Blood. I started Fire and Blood a few days ago to get back into the Westeros feeling.
I'm planning to save that after I finish A Song of Ice and Fire, because I just have a feeling that once I finish my reread, I'm going to be just itching for more A Song of Ice and Fire content, since we don't have any more books out yet.
Yeah.
So I'm going to save that and the Dunk and Egg novella and all that. So
it's really, I'm surprised that it's as good and as easy to read as it is proving to be, because normally, like, I DNF the Silmarillion, you know, I mean, I know that disqualifies me as being a real Tolkien fan, but that was, I mean, I was a teenager. I was just like, yeah, more Middle Earth. And then I was reading this dense history and it just didn't grab me at all. And I was kind of thinking Fire and Blood. I was like, oh, I hope it's not really boring, but it's totally not.
Raph is totally after you in the comment section.
Yeah, Raph can go to hell. He knows I love him, but he can go to hell. Yeah, and I was just like, it's a history, and it's probably going to kind of drag. And I read in the first day, I read 150 pages. no problem. And now I'm like 400 pages through. I mean, it's very generously typeset. So it's like a 750 page book that is actually more like a 450 page book. If you set the type closer and smaller, like every other book. I keep thinking maybe Fire and Blood is more boring than Silmarillion. Go to hell, Philip Chase. There's no fantasy book that's more boring than the Silmarillion.
I've never heard Phil get heated up like that. That's so funny.
Yeah, exactly.
This is really fun. This is
Ruth Ann Bad is absolutely correct. I mean, the Silmarillion is it's a history textbook. It's
I haven't read it yet. I haven't read the Silmarillion or Fire and Blood, so maybe
I
I'll be
guess
at some point. I'm supposed to be reading the Silmarillion with Jake Bishop
right.
at some point.
Right.
We keep talking about it, but I don't think we have plans to do it yet. But
let me know if that ever comes up. I do want to try it again, and I think it's not a good book to read when you're a teenager, and it might be better when you're my age. Chadia, I'll be actually making, before the end of the month, I should be putting out a video about like official let's all read Realm of the Elderlings together announcement. So yeah, I'm into
You're just getting so many. That's so funny. DNFing the Silmarillion, not okay. Everybody's pretty upset with you right now, Matt.
Yeah. I don't know. Let me look in my pocket.
I think DNFing the Silmarillion is even worse than me not starting the Silmarillion at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many. I think 14-year-olds have tried and finished the Silmarillion. I'm not that smart, and I definitely wasn't that smart then.
Have you read it, Angela? Have you read the Silmarillion?
I've read it, but I didn't read it when I was 14. I read Lord of the Rings when I was 14. Which I discovered through a classmate who was reading it. And I was thinking, oh, okay. So I got it from the library to read it. And yeah, that's hooked me for fantasy, basically. And that was still in a translation as well. So I read this in German first. And then, I was in university. So I must have been early 20s, like 22 or something like that, when I reread Lord of the Rings, this time then in English, and then just kept going. So I read the Silmarillion then as well. Yeah, it's not the most memorable book either. But I don't remember it as being particularly boring or more boring than other stuff. But then I was in the middle of my undergrad degree and had tons of boring stuff. So compared to that, the Silmarillion probably was still much, much better. No? So there's that as well.
Yeah, I would agree with Herr Professor Dr. Philip Chase that if you've spent decades studying stories in Old English, that the Silmarillion's probably exciting.
Exactly.
I think it'd be really fun to see Philip cover that on his channel. I mean, he's covered his Malazan reread. It'd be kind of fun to see him cover Lord of the Rings again and the Silmarillion.
I'm glad to see in the chat that everyone still loves me, at least.
There you see, it's a very forgiving community.
He's fighting for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so another book, speaking of another book, by the way, The Counselor is one that, Matt, you've gotten me very interested in. And Angela, I think I saw that on a TBR. Did you read it? Have you read it yet?
I've read it. And this morning, actually filmed my review. So the next video up will be my review for The Counselor.
Oh, how exciting.
Yes.
Did you like it?
I love it. It's absolutely fabulous. I think so. It's really, really good. It's really great.
Yeah. If I do a like an end of year looking back kind of thing, The Counselor, unless something surprises me in the next 3 weeks, The Counselor will be maybe my favorite book of the year, but definitely the most original book of the year.
Yeah.
Wow. So that comes from some high praise from two people I highly respect. So Everybody, that's the Counselor by E.J. Beaton. I just don't hear enough about this book. So
I'm a little disappointed actually. I've been in touch with Elise on Twitter, and I was a little disappointed that her next book is not going to be, or actually their next book. I think she's non-binary.
I think she's non-binary. Yeah.
Their next book is going to be not the second book in the duology, but it's a gender flipped retelling of a Greek myth. And
could be interesting as well, I think.
Sure.
But I was hoping as well.
I wanted the second book.
Exactly, to get a bit more from that world, because I think also the main character is very, like you say, very original. No? So to have a very highly educated female main character, I think that's very refreshing to see as well. So yeah.
And in a way, the book, because of the main character and who she is, the book is basically a love story about books. That's at least one of the themes in a way in the book. And it's really good. It's really, really good.
Yeah. So
and there are lots of female characters that are in positions of power. They're all flawed in a way as well. No, so it's not just because how shall I say, it's a world of equal opportunity, but also where gender fluidity and also sexual preferences are normalized. Doesn't mean that women are automatically the good ones, no? And I think I really like that as well.
It reminded me in that sense a lot of Malazan, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's a world where like nobody thinks about you changing sexual partners from one gender to the other. Nobody thinks about women being in any kind of position. Nobody thinks about any of that kind of stuff. It's just like completely normal. Basically just like Malazan. Yeah. So it reminded me there a lot.
I am so excited to read this book. So it's going to be a duology, is that right? Or
it's going to be a duology, and it sounds like it's going to take a couple of years for the second book to come out, because she's putting out, I think it's like March next year or something. This Greek myth retelling comes
and I
out.
saw Raf's comment here about, I'm so sick of myth retelling. Part of me is just keeping my mouth shut. But
they're very popular at the moment.
I kind of agree with him. Yeah, and I was really disappointed when I heard that Elise was going to put out a myth retelling. I mean, it's gender flipped. Maybe there's something interesting going on with that. I really don't know. But
I think that was like, well, I think there's a sapphic romance or something. I don't know. In Song of Achilles, I haven't read it.
Yeah. Song of Achilles. It's basically Achilles and Patroclus are. I mean, it's in the original. You could almost assume it. Like when I read Homer, I was like, "Are these guys gay?" Sounds like they, but maybe it's just a Greek culture difference from the past. I don't know. In Song of Achilles, they are gay, definitely, for sure.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And they're like this, you know.
I haven't read that one. I did read Madeline Miller's Circe, and that was pretty good. I did enjoy that.
I DNF'd Circe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't even read it.
The first
was okay.
The first third of it sounded to me, it just seemed like she was really whiny.
Ah, interesting.
It's just like she was complaining about everything all the time. I never even got to the bit where, like, I know who Circe is.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know, where's the island, and you know, all of the stuff that's coming, and I didn't get that far. She was just annoying me so much that I put the book down.
Yeah, I could actually see that. I could see that being a complaint, because I could remember. Yeah, I listened to it on audio, and the audiobook narrator was fantastic.
Yeah,
too. No, I enjoyed it though. I did enjoy it, but yeah, I could see that being a thing.
Dan Simmons, Rafa's got a grudge against Dan Simmons at the moment.
I don't know much about Dan Simmons, but I know that
Rafa's Hyperion.
Yeah, I haven't read it.
Okay, yeah.
Hyperion
is actually it's my most recommended sci-fi book, but Raf is Raf, and he gets into the politics and everything that's going on in the behind the scenes, which I don't think about that much. And apparently Dan Simmons is a bit of a dick.
That's what I've heard. Yeah, unfortunately, because I do everything I've heard about Hyperion though makes it sound like this would be the sci-fi book for me. I mean, it has time travel in it. Everything about it sounds amazing. Everything about it sounds amazing. Just the various
It's a very
short
good book.
stories that it kind of blend together, and I love that kind of format.
At least
So-
in the first book. The first book is Canterbury Tale structure. The second book not. And then the two afterwards, Endymion and Rise of Endymion, are also not in that structure exactly. But yeah, it's got kind of everything you could have. Evil computers, time travel, big space opera, many planets, all sorts of stuff going on. It's really, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I'm curious about it. I will get to it at some point. And then another author I really want to get to that I know you've talked about quite a bit on your channel, Angela, is well, actually, I really want to get to Ursula K. Le Guin and some of her
Oh, yeah,
stuff.
okay.
I know she's known for the Earthsea books, but I really want to read The Dispossessed is the one that I want to read the most right now. And the other one is Nydia Okorafor. Okorafor. I think that's how you
Yeah,
say her name.
Nydia Okorafor, yeah.
Yeah, those are the ones I really want to get to. Yeah, so that's too bad about Dan Simmons, though. But I think I still own Hyperion. I'm going to give it a shot at some point. The only reason I've been holding off is because I've heard that it's best to read the sequel right after the second one. So
when it came out, I was working. I was in university. I was working in a bookstore, and I was in charge of the sci-fi and fantasy section. And it came in, and I looked at it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to read this." And I immediately, like, lunch every day in the food court in the shopping mall where I was working in a bookstore, I would go and read it. And in the first half hour of one of my lunch breaks, I finished the first book, and I was like, "What? That's how it ends?" And I ran from my lunch break back to the store and bought the second book and went back to my lunch break so I could start the second book immediately, because he originally wrote the first two as a book. Like many authors, publisher cut it in half. And where it ends is like, you can't just stop there. So yeah, you need to get at least the first two books.
Yeah. And I'd be curious. I guess I'll have to ask Raf sometime about the problematic content, because I really don't know about that either.
I think
it's good to hear about these things, but
I think it's more as later stuff. I've seen Raf talking about it, and it seems like Dan Simmons has become kind of a right-wing nut job, as Raf just said, over time.
Yeah.
And maybe the later books have some of that stuff in it. The last time I read them, I don't remember, but I don't necessarily think about that sort of stuff that much.
Yeah. I think about it a little bit sometimes. I think I'm always forgiving of it if it's I'm usually, I should say always, but I tend to be more forgiving of it when it comes from a book that was written during a certain time period, and maybe, social consciousness has evolved since that time. But it is a question to be brought up, I think, when it's someone who is current, as to whether we're supporting that or not even that. I don't know. Those are just tricky questions.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, there's supporting it, but there's also like, the only way to really know for yourself what the book is about and how you feel about it is ultimately reading it. No, even if you know from the start that it might contain things that you might not be okay with, but then, it doesn't prevent you from reflecting on it, no, and then voicing your own criticism about it, not just because the book has a certain reputation or something like that. No?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's good to, sometimes I think it's good to separate the book from the author.
Well, that's as well, no? I mean, that's another issue then, yeah.
And
we'll see you later, Philip. Thank you
see
for
you, Philip.
joining us.
Okay, thank you.
I think I think it's especially good to separate the book from the author in the sense that you don't start thinking that because something's in a book, it's what the author believes. Right? I mean,
Oh, of course, yes.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
horrible and disgusting things in Malazan,
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
and that's not Erikson.
That's
Right?
right.
He's not
Mhm.
doing that because he's an awful person. He's trying to
Right.
make you think about these awful things, you know?
Oh, yeah.
and then-
That's totally different. Yeah.
yeah, but that's
Yeah.
the other direction. And then like if the author is a horrible person, I definitely don't like it if I have the feeling that the author is trying to convince me of some questionable things,
Yes.
through their novel, that they're not just trying to make me think about it. This is actually their worldview, and they're trying to convert me in some way. That to me is pretty ugly.
I don't know if I like authors trying to convince me of their worldviews through books. I don't know. I guess I'm mixed about that.
I
On the
mean,
one hand, yes, and on the other hand,
Yeah.
sometimes I think it can be okay, but that generally is only going to be when it's a worldview that you already kind of more or less agree with.
Yeah, that's true.
Like a total asshole trying to convince you of his worldview is not going to be pleasant.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think
That's-
that's what I haven't read the books that Raph is talking about, but I think that's what he's saying about Dan Simmons, is that later, after Hyperion and all of that, he wrote some books which were unpleasant because he's unpleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in general, I don't like being preached to, I have to say.
Yeah.
No? So if it's very overt and kind of like constantly in my face, no, this is my opinion and this is how things have to be. That for me is more off-putting, I think. On that count, I'm really with Stephen Erikson, who says you have to hide your theme, kind of like put a ton of earth on top and make sure nobody finds it too fast. No?
I mean, the good thing about Erikson is he's really, really available. I've almost never. I don't think I've ever seen more interviews with an author than with him.
Yeah, that's very true. Like, I mean, he's very accessible and also very free with his time, no? Because I mean.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing, but because of that, I feel like I feel like I have a feeling for who he is as a person. And then
because he's also very open about his process and how he writes, how he comes to the conclusions that are in his books, no, which is rather rare, unfortunately, I have to say. I wish there were more authors who would not necessarily just engage with their fans like that, but would be more open about their process, whereas mostly creatives are, and this is not just authors, but other creators as well, are very guarded, as if I tell somebody how I do this, then they take away from me or something like that. So I personally would say as well, it's very admirable what he's doing.
Yeah, and then like you compare that to his books, and I mean, I don't think he hides his themes. I think most of his themes, I mean, to me, most of his themes seem relatively obvious. He's got a lot in there about greed and capitalism, and he's got a lot in there about environmentalism and obviously compassion and doing things for people, self-sacrifice. There's all that sort of stuff in there. But I never feel like he's telling me what to think.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
He's just bringing up an issue and showing different sides of it and letting me decide what I think.
I also think it's what he means by this is probably more the writing process and how he packages those themes when he says he has this metaphor about the theme being inside of the burrow, with the stone structure then around it and the earth on top, and so I think that is more geared towards his process and how as a writer you should approach your theme, not so much than what the reader in the end sees as an end product.
Right.
At least that's how I understand it.
Yep.
Yeah. It's interesting too, though. I actually asked him this question in the chat over on Steve's channel, because at the time I was reading Babel by R.F. Kuang, and I watched this Oxford discussion with her. and she was talking about how she thinks as author, she has a very different take on this in a way. She says,
Yeah, I believe as well, because I've read Babel, and yeah,
so you know how hard she hammers.
those themes are really
This is
Yeah.
this is the number one reason why I am not attracted to reading Babel.
No, you should. I would not.
Everything
I
I've
really
heard
don't
about
fully
it, I'm like,
understand that, I have to
It
say.
does
Yeah,
not come highly recommended for me, but
Yeah.
but I did appreciate hearing her perspective on it, because she did do that very purposefully. And I guess her take on that is that if you don't hammer these themes, people don't listen. But at the same time, one of my friends here on BookTube brought this up, like, yeah, but the people who don't listen are probably not the people who are going to pick up that book in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, so and yeah, anyway.
well, and I think you also run the risk of
no?
I think you
Because-
also run the risk of driving people away who might actually
Yeah.
think about your themes if they were slightly
Yeah.
subtler, you know.
Right.
I mean,
Well-
they are very important themes, and they seem to be very close to her heart. No? So I get that she wants people to pick up on them and to kind of think about them. But like Matt just said, no, it might have the opposite effect. For me, it definitely had the opposite effect, that after a while I was just sitting there and thinking to myself, no, thank you, but no.
Yeah. It's just interesting. But at the same time, it is landing with a lot of people. I think maybe, different types of readers. There's definitely an audience for that. And I don't know. It's interesting. And I feel like a lot of people, they do want that. I feel like it's not even that dissimilar from people who enjoy Sanderson, because he has the invisible prose. You know what I mean? It's not, he doesn't hide what he's doing with any sort of subtext or metaphor, or, he just gives it to you straight. So I don't know. I guess that's appealing to some people. And on the one, I feel kind of conflicted about that, because I mean, on the one hand, I don't think that's really where I'm at right now with what I want to pick up personally for my personal preference. And at the same time, it's drawing a lot of people to the genre, that the accessibility of that kind of transparent writing style, of those more, overt themes. And at the same time, I'm like, I want fantasy to be popular. I don't know. It's kind of a tricky thing. I guess it's nice that we have a range.
We don't have to read all the fantasy books.
That's true. Yeah.
And I mean, the more diverse, the better. No? So, I mean, on one level, I'm glad that a book like Babel is out there, because it deals with important themes, and I think there are people who will love it and also perhaps profit from it. But the way I thought after a while, I'm probably not the right person for this book, because I know enough or a lot about translation myself. I have translated stuff myself. I've taught translation at some stage. So whatever she's telling me in this book about translation, how translation works, is not really news for me. No, so I had to look for other things to keep this entertaining. And the prose just wasn't it then, no, because it's pretty straightforward. But as you say, I mean, there are people who probably want exactly that type of book, and there is nothing wrong with that. No, because just because that wasn't for me doesn't mean that it's not, a good book for somebody else. No.
Yeah, it could have definitely been for me at a certain point too. I mean, you never know. I know Raph loved it though. Raph says that he agrees with her though. He said he's encountered people who think imperialism and colonialism were good and helped India and China, and that's reason enough to hammer the point home. Fair enough.
I think what Babel really does very, very good is when it shows the price for people who have a multicultural heritage and who come from this or are negotiating this type of colonialism or imperialism. And this kind of like hope that's created for them. If you are like us, then we will give you this, that, and the other. And then each time when they think they've reached this goal of assimilation or conforming to the dominant culture, now it's snatched away again. No, and they're told, no, you're the other. We don't really want you. No, go away. And I think she describes this mechanism in a really, really great and exemplary way. And I think
Yeah.
that is really a strength of that book.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's actually a really great point. I'm going to read one of the comments here by Von Roycroft, which I really am excited, by the way, about The Severing Sun. That's
Me
one.
too.
Yeah. Especially Philip's review. Philip's quoted again, by the way, in that book. As a writer, one of my favorite things about my writing journey was discovering the themes that are important to me. Finding them through the process feels very organic to me. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's something fun about it too, like discovering the themes.
I think it's
That process.
interesting. I mean, I don't really write, but
Yeah.
I've heard, and I think it was George, Big George, R.R. Martin. I think he said that writers tend to be either architects or gardeners. Like they either have a big plan and outline and, you know, everything's
Mhm.
sort of planned out in detail, or they tend to be someone who writes and finds out what's going to happen as they're writing, you know. And it sounds like Vaughn is more of a gardener than an architect. I find that super exciting because Stephen King also talks about that. I've heard him talk about that, where he's like he creates characters and then they do stuff, and he writes about the stuff they do, but
Yeah.
he doesn't know what they're going to do exactly. You know.
I actually heard Von Roycroft. Oh, you said okay. He says he is definitely a gardener there. So
Yeah.
you're, I guess, right on with that. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that too. I think it's really beautiful when a story can kind of take its own life and a person's just kind of allowing it. I feel the same way when I watch good musicians sometimes. Sometimes you'll watch a really good musician and it feels like, and it's going to sound a little woo-woo, but it almost feels like they're channeling something. Like they're almost not in control. They're just a vessel and something else is coming forth out of them. And it's such a cool thing to witness.
Yeah.
Jesus, please don't give Raph an axe.
I could see Raph as a lumberjack. That'd be awesome.
I can totally imagine Raph swinging around a double-headed axe, but please don't give him one.
I better go hide the axe that I used for one of my videos.
He lives in the same country as me, so
yeah. Well, then you have to be very careful now. I mean,
yeah.
I'm a bit further away, so I might be okay.
Yeah. So you and Raph live pretty close, or?
Not that close. I actually, it's funny. Not long after I started my channel, he mentioned where he lives on one of his videos, and then my client that I was working for was sending me to do some work, and they were like, "Can you go there?" And I was like, "Really?" And I wrote him, and I was actually going to visit him because I knew he lived there. I liked his videos. We had chatted a couple of times, and then the work thing fell through, so I didn't end up going there. It's actually not that close. He wouldn't hit me with an axe from there. I think it's like 5 or 6 hours on a train or something.
Oh no, he has an axe, so I get to see Raph, an axe in one hand and a beer in the other.
I can totally imagine it.
And Von Roycroft says, describing how things come to me definitely requires me to get woo-woo. Yay.
Are you talking, Vaughn? Are you talking about smoking pot? Or what kind of woo-woo are you talking
the muses, about? You know? Handling the muses.
Well, I mean, that's a time-honored way by writers as well, no? Smoking pot, drinking, whatever.
Yeah, all types of things like that.
I'm drinking. This is red wine.
Good, so. Good for you.
Yeah, a little early in the day for me to do that, but
well, it's
exactly.
8 in the evening here. So.
I opted for just water.
Vodka.
Exactly. This is a very large.
I a while ago, I dated a Ukrainian lady, and at some point we were traveling in Ukraine, and she wanted me to meet her family. So I knew that her dad was a big guy in the army, and he was, you know, one of these kind of dudes. So I was like, I'll bring him a nice bottle of scotch. as a gift. And we sat down to dinner, and the first thing he did was he took a glass like this
Okay.
and half filled it with vodka for each of us.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So we drank the vodka,
That's
and
from you.
then I gave him the scotch, and he started to pour it into a glass like this. And I was like, no, wait a sec. And we couldn't communicate. Yeah, he didn't speak English. I don't speak Russian or Ukrainian. So I was like, no. And through my girlfriend, I was like, no, you drink scotch slowly. And he was like, why?
That expression.
Why?
That was
totally
even
didn't
harder
get it.
for him to translate.
Yeah, it was a big evening. It was a big
Wow.
evening.
Wow. That would be wild.
And that was normal for him. That was like dinner every day for him.
Wow.
Yeah, not even a special occasion, just like rup, 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 rup.
That's so funny. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What all do you two do for fun outside of books? One book too.
For fun outside of books.
One
Yeah.
of the things I do pretty regularly is actually role playing games.
Oh,
Okay.
really?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not D&D. D&D is the one that everybody in the world knows.
Yeah.
And I started with D&D back when I was 12 or 14 or something. But now totally different ones. What are we playing at the moment? We're playing Väsen at the moment, which is if you imagine 19th century Ghostbusters in Sweden.
What?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll
That's
roll
all.
with that.
Why not?
You play characters that are capable. Most people in the world are in this world are not capable of seeing supernatural anything.
Mm.
Mhm.
And you play a group of characters who have come together because they are capable of seeing it. And they're essentially running around solving supernatural problems. It's fun.
Okay.
It's fun.
That
And
sounds cool.
It's all based on actual 19th century Swedish folklore
Ah,
and the kind of stuff that people believed. Actually, the book I did a book review a while ago for an art book called Väsen,
yeah.
which is the art book that the game is based on.
Okay.
I think I remember you showing that book. That looks really
Yeah,
cool.
I've seen the review, but I wasn't really sure about those connections to
Yeah,
role-playing
no.
game now.
I actually went the other way around. I found the game at some point, and then I liked the illustrations so much because I studied painting and I'm a designer, and I was like, okay, who did these illustrations? And I looked the guy up, and he had a book,
Right.
which was mostly art and then folktale stories about these creatures. And that now I've got all of his art books and a couple of other games that he also illustrated. Really, really nice stuff.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow, that's
Okay.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up with a group of gamers. Like those were the people, those were my people. But I never was a gamer. I was
Raph-
never
Me neither. I mean, I never really got into this whole role-playing game stuff. What I was
Yeah.
more into, well, since high school and then all through university would have been theater. So I was part of several drama groups and stuff like that. So, but the whole role-playing stuff just bypassed me.
Yeah.
Raph is asking a role-playing game nerd question. No, Raph, it is not. The guy who did Tales from the Loop is Simon Stielenhag. I also have all of his art books and his games, but totally different thing. The same thing happened though. I found Tales from the Loop, which is a role-playing game. It had amazing illustrations in it. I went and looked the guy up, and then I started buying his art books. I'll do some reviews of his art books as well.
What is Vasen or Vasen?
Väsen are these creatures, these folktale creatures.
Oh, I think I do remember seeing that word now because I did read not the
Yeah,
second
like one just says there, they're in the Bloodsworn saga.
yeah,
Where you
I
have
read it.
this world where the
Yeah.
those mythical creatures are suddenly a reality, you know. So yeah.
That's right. I'd forgotten about that already. Yeah, I read that book at the beginning of the year, and I haven't read the sequel yet. Have you read the sequel, The Hunger of the God?
No, I haven't yet. No.
I've heard.
Eric-
I think he recaps what happens in the first book. Fortunately.
I hope so.
I know, because it's been a while for me too. I'm like, oh, I hope
It's
I have
on my
time.
TBR for this year, but I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah, I don't know when
The Hunger
I'll,
of the
when I'll get
Gods.
to it
So
either.
no.
Eric
No.
also mentions board games, which is another thing I do for fun.
Have I read
Play a lot of
Scythe?
board games.
Have I played Scythe? I'm trying to think if I played that. Yeah.
It's
I
a
recently tried
kind
to
of
get
complicated board game where you have little mechs and you're building sort of bases and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds fun. Okay, yeah, Basin. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Cool.
The artist, why am I blacking out on his name? I can't read the books from here. He says Vessen, and he's
Vessen.
Swedish, so
Vessen. Yeah.
I guess that's the right way to say it.
Yeah.
We will
Yeah.
have to accept that, I presume. Yeah.
Johan Egerkrans. He's also a guy who just recently did illustrations for a new edition of Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, and the Silmarillion.
Oh, cool.
He did the covers, and they're gorgeous. I have the Lord of the Rings, and the Hobbit and Silmarillion are not out in English yet, only Swedish, which I can't read.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that they will come out in English eventually.
Ah,
What
Because
about
his
German?
illustrations are.
Have they been translated into German?
I don't. Well, I mean, it's Lord of the Rings, so the translations are there, but
Yeah.
the editions, I don't think they've been published at all in German.
Okay.
I don't like. I can read German, but it doesn't flow for me. Like
Yeah,
I'll read news in German, but I won't read
Mm.
novels in German.
Yeah. Okay.
It just doesn't. I don't know.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
a different.
To
type of-
answer your question, what do I do for fun if I don't read?
What
I
do you do for fun?
I recently picked up belly dancing.
That's so cool. You like
Have you-
it?
I
Have you got
love
any
it.
photos?
I love it, yeah.
You
Pardon?
got photos you can share with us?
No, not tonight. I need probably a drink before I do this in public.
That's awesome, though.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I took a belly dancing class a few years ago, and unfortunately, I didn't continue it. I don't remember why, but I took like a summer belly dancing course, just a few courses, and it was really cool. It was really, really cool.
Yes,
And
isn't it? Yeah, it's
and
cool.
hard.
Yeah. When I was in university in Germany, well, there were loads of, let's say, more international student parties, and the Turkish girls would then kind of like at a certain point in the evening now start dancing and also start belly dancing, and I just let myself get roped into that and already liked it then. And when I got the opportunity and found out there's a course very close to where I am here, I thought, why not give that a try again? And yeah, it's fabulous. I love it.
That's so fun. That is so cool.
So that's what I do when I'm not reading, or like when Matt said he studied arts. I didn't study art, but I am an artist, so I do. That's basically the day job, so to say, of sorts. So if I don't paint and don't read, then it's now belly dancing.
Yeah. Before I started my channel, I was really into painting. I just for fun, I got really into
Great.
painting, and I used to do a lot of art, and I just don't really do it anymore, and it's really too bad. I guess I just feel like I always need a good amount of time to immerse myself into that activity. But I wish I could take an art class. I think if I took an art class, I would probably be a lot more motivated, possibly, and just getting that feedback is really helpful, and feeling like I'm building a skill too, because it's hard when you're just kind of winging it on your own.
Yeah.
There's also groups. I used to go to a group because I studied art, but I didn't really pursue it. But every now and then I've sort of gone back into it more and less. There was a group when I was living in Sydney that I think it was once a month. They organized a thing in a really nice bar that had a stage, and they would get models in, and people would come buy drinks and draw.
Okay.
You know, like live drawing, but in a bar.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
so much fun. You just sit in the bar and you've got a nice drink and you're drawing models, and like every half an hour they change poses, and you just
Oh, I
end
love
up with a
that.
whole bunch of
Yeah.
sketches of live models. So it was really nice.
Were they nude?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. I did take a nude
Very
drawing
tolerant
class.
bar. I don't think that would work here, perhaps. But
Yeah.
I did a live drawing course, and that was organized from one of the museums here. And so instead of being somewhere in a room secluded away, we were sometimes in the big foyer in the museum, and you were kind of like trying to whatever you were doing, and before you know it, you have a group of Japanese tourists gawking at you and starting to click their
Oh,
cameras,
yeah,
and you're
that
like,
would work.
go away.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I do for fun is archery.
Oh, that's
Oh, wow.
amazing.
It
I
is.
feel like
It's
I would
fun.
be terrible at that, but that'd be so fun.
I mean, there isn't that much to it, to be honest.
Really?
No, I mean, as long as you've got a bow that fits your strength,
Yeah.
like you don't want a bow that's really hard to hold back,
Mhm.
but if you've got a bow that fits your strength, then it's just a matter of like adjusting.
Then I could be a real elven archer. And we have a
Exactly.
question here from Paramita, question for Angela. Do you prefer to read translated Polish authors such as Olga, I'm going to totally butcher this, Toka, thank you,
Tokarczuk.
in the original Polish or in English? Is something lost in translation?
Ideally, I should read her in Polish, but there's also a time factor. So if I read in Polish, it takes me much, much longer because sometimes my vocab just doesn't spread this far. So I would have to look up stuff more and so on. So I do read Polish authors done in translation, even if I shouldn't, perhaps. Is there something inevitably lost in translation? Probably yes, but also maybe there's also something gained. I mean, a good translator will probably be able to get across what the author tries to say and how the author tries to say it. So
that's really cool take on that.
Because I translated once poems by Ivan Goll, a German poet of the Expressionist movement, so early 20th century. And he uses a lot of compound nouns, so where kind of like two nouns are glued together, which is very common in German, but it's not so common in English. So, yeah, I created a couple new words for the English language just to get a couple of things across. So sometimes I think there might be a little bit of gain as well in translation. So
I find translation totally bizarre. I didn't read all the way through, but I've looked at The Lord of the Rings in German.
Yeah.
Because it's like the fantasy book that I know the best in English. And I'm fluent in German. So I was like, I wonder what it's like. And most of the names are changed, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't agree with this personally now, I have to say.
Where they sound like a thing, right? So Bilbo Baggins sounds like bag, right? It comes from something to do with bag because he's a thief and, he's putting things in his bag. And that name is changed. Bilbo isn't, but Baggins is changed to Beutlin because Beutel is like a bag in German. And Rivendell is Bruchtal, I think.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's changed to Bruchtal because it's like Broken Valley, which is what
Valley,
Rivendell kind of
so
means.
They take names and translate them literally in a way. I don't know when this translation actually was done, but I think there was a trend at some stage not to do that. Also, if you look at German films and TV series, if they're originally English, then most of them get new German titles that have nothing to do with the original title. No? And I personally don't get why that's the case.
It's the other way around too, though. I was watching something recently on Netflix that was originally in German.
Right,
and
yeah.
I was having a hard time really understanding what they were saying and like hearing it. So I put on the English subtitles. and being able to hear and understand the German and read the subtitles, they were very different.
Right.
I was like, wow, the translation's way off on this. I
Oh,
don't
Yeah.
know why they
was
did it.
Dark?
Yeah.
Dark, the show?
Dark is a bit like that, yeah.
Is it? Oh, because I watched.
I mean, you can watch Dark synced as well.
Because
like
I
with
watched
English
it, the English
voices.
I did. I watched
Yeah.
it with the English synced,
Yeah.
and it's one of my favorite shows of all time, like ever.
Have you seen the new one? The new one by the same guy?
No.
The director producer, I think they're actually a couple. They did Dark, and now they've done 1899, which is 1899. It's probably still good, but it's much better to watch with subtitles
Okay.
because everybody on the ship, I counted at least 10 different languages that the people on the ship speak. So there's Polish, German, French, English, Japanese, Chinese, there's just like tons of different languages being spoken by the people on the ship, and they can't understand each other. Right.
Wow.
So if you listen to it synced, which is how it default started with me, I was watching it and I was like, this is kind of weird. It feels like something's a little off. And then I turned off the sync and put on the English subtitles. And I was like, oh, it seems weird because he's speaking French to someone who doesn't understand French. I really enjoyed it. But if you like Dark,
Dark is a masterpiece to me. Dark
Yeah.
is, I mean, I thought it was a masterpiece, but
I wouldn't say 1899 is as good so far. It's only one season so far, but it's by the same people. And if you like Dark, you might like it.
yeah. When Shadia, do you mean Dark? I'm assuming that 1899, does that have
1899 is not time travel, no.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I agree. I love Stranger Things. At least the last season was really good. I didn't really care for, I think, the second season. I can't remember. But Dark is better. Dark is the best because it's
better.
It's all in 3 seasons, and it was like perfectly conceived from beginning to end. It's very complicated, and it lives up to its title. But hands down, one of my favorite shows of all time.
It reminded me of Lost. Not
I
because
never
it's
saw Lost.
not because it's any. Well, I mean, for anyone who's seen Lost, Dark is not anything like Lost, but it has the same feeling for a long time where you're like, what the fuck's going on?
Yeah, it's messy. It's
I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And that you just get like drip fed clues and little bits and pieces. Yep.
Oh, I adore it.
Dark is amazing.
I adore that show. I adore it so much. There are a ton of characters. I think it's like written for people who like love fantasy and sci-fi because you get so many different perspectives, but it's just brilliant. It's
not only so many characters, but sometimes 2 characters are the same character.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so good. It's so good.
Larry says it's better than Lost. Yes, it's better than Lost. I just meant that the feeling of there being like this huge mystery and you have no idea what's going on, and it takes a while until you really get some solid clues. It's very confusing at the beginning, but it pays off.
Yeah, the end just had me so emotional. It just grabbed my soul. I absolutely loved it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody should watch it. It's good to go in not knowing anything about it, Jimmy. Just go in not knowing anything. I didn't know anything when I watched it. And it's perfect that way.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, Angela. I don't know if you watched Dark.
No, I haven't watched it. No, I haven't watched it.
Yeah.
So, but good to know that it's good. If I need something, then I can check it out.
We sci-fi and fantasy nerds are so lucky right now.
Yeah, we are.
We are living in like the high peak golden age of sci-fi and fantasy TV. Whether you like each series or not, there's so much of it now. And when I was growing up, there was sci-fi, but there was no fantasy at all.
Yeah.
That's so true. I'm trying to think if growing up, I remember I liked a lot of those cult classic, like Labyrinth and Dark Crystal and Legend and The Last Unicorn. things like
But
that.
like
Never
TV series,
really-
TV series.
Oh,
There
the
were
TV
no,
series then.
there was no fantasy on television
Yeah.
at all, except movies
Mhm.
that were sometimes shown. But there were no series that I remember. There was
No,
lots of sci-fi. I used to watch when I was growing up. I watched Flash Gordon, not Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, and I watched Doctor Who, and I watched Battlestar Galactica, and Star Trek, of course, and all of that stuff. But there was no fantasy.
That's
Yeah.
so true. That's such a good point.
And since Game of Thrones, I've got a friend who's a writer for television, and
Xena.
yeah, I'm older than that. Xena was not around when I was a kid. I'm too old for Xena.
Yeah.
Xena hit when I was like 30. So
Oh wow. Okay.
yeah.
I was
Xena.
I was younger than that, but
I was born in the 60s.
Oh wow.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, tomorrow's my birthday and I will be 53.
Happy birthday to Matt.
Yeah,
Everybody
happy
wish
birthday.
Matt a happy birthday.
Not quite yet, but yeah.
Are you doing anything fun for your birthday?
I'm having a live chat with Theo and Alex and Andrew.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't really care about birthdays.
This seems the trend these days.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like birthday celebrations are something I've only done when I had a girlfriend because she cared about it.
Aww.
You know, and if the girlfriend wants to organize something and do something nice, then yeah, cool. But I just don't care about it that much.
Oh man, when I was young, I used to throw big, huge parties for my birthday, and they were so fun. Usually at a friend's house, a friend, and there was usually a lot of alcohol involved, and it got pretty wild. But it was always so funny because I'd end up at these parties that were technically for my birthday, but a bunch of ragtag teenagers coming together, and the next thing I know, I'd run into somebody like, I went to elementary school with you. Oh yeah. Who are you? I'm like, oh yeah, this is my birthday party. Oh really? Whoa. I don't know. It'd always be so random. We'd always end up so random and weird.
That cannot happen to me in Berlin.
There's
a lot of foreigners.
Me in Dublin either.
There's a lot of foreigners in Berlin. I mean, Berlin, like
It's already kind of random and weird.
German in Berlin is like a minority language, but I guess it's theoretically possible that I can run into someone from Washington, D.C. or Sydney in Berlin, but the chances that I went to school with them are really slim.
Yeah.
So,
that is really slim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones. Yeah, Larry said Game of Thrones. That's what changed it for fantasy TV.
Oh yeah,
all the extremely cautious producers, they saw that you can produce a fantasy television show and it becomes the biggest thing on TV. I've got a friend in he's French, but he lives in Berlin, and he does writing for television shows. He actually did some writing for 1899, and I was talking to him on the weekend, and he was like, any fantasy idea that is halfway feasible, if you can keep the budget low, you can get someone to make it right now. Because every producer is like, give me fantasy TV shows, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I can make my debut as an elf.
Exactly. I just need to teach you archery.
Yes, that'd be fantastic.
But there you are. We can launch our own fantasy show here.
We've got a human archer, an elf archer, and a belly dancer.
Yeah,
there you go.
Perfect.
Do our own.
So maybe we can rope somebody like Vaughn or something in for the script to write something.
Oh yeah, that'd be perfect. Yes.
I also own a sword. So
hey, the prop department is completely there. Great.
Taken care of. We don't need a prop budget.
That's so true. Because I mean, if you think about it, like we have a critical dragon. So we have a dragon, and we have nefarious
gray-bearded dragon.
All types of different casting opportunities here.
Kev is watching us from the parking lot.
Oh, yay! I'm excited that to watch Kevin's journey because he's currently reading The Crippled God, and so I cannot wait. I cannot wait to hear his final thoughts.
We
he
should
didn't
expect to see his brain splattered on the wall behind him in the final video. It will blow your mind, Kev.
I cannot wait. And Kyle is here. I'm late. Thanks for being here. And by the way, Kyle is going to be starting Malazan Book of the Fallen in January. So,
But ignore what he thinks about it because Kyle is always wrong.
or no, December. Is he start? Wait, you have to correct me, Kyle. I'm sorry. Because Kyle sometimes has wrong opinions.
Kyle
Alan is always saying.
always has wrong opinions.
Oh no. Raph the Viking. That's funny.
Raph with his beard and his hair and his axe. Yep.
Yeah. My cover artist is doing conceptual art for what he calls an upcoming huge fantasy
Oh.
adaptation show. That's awesome. Wow. He won't tell you. Aw.
But Vaughn, if it's Malazan, you have to find out what it is. We have to know. No, you can't. Malazan would be too much.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I feel like somebody said recently that there's been some talk, but that people can't say much. I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
I've heard. I have a number of friends who work in the role playing game industry, and I've heard over and over again that there are deals being made with Esselmont and Ericsson about putting out some sort of role playing game based on Malazan. But that's been going on for like 15 years, and something comes up and it sounds like it's going to happen, and then it falls through for whatever reason, no idea, and then something else comes up, and I don't know.
Yeah. So I love that I get to be the grimdark element.
You are because you're the elvish assassin. Yeah.
And then Kyle asked, but what if he loves Malazan?
See, Kyle, this is the psychological game I am playing with you.
And he likes most things.
Yeah.
January.
Just the wrong things.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to read fast, Kyle, because I just finished book 5. And if you can get up to book 6 or 7 sometime soon, we can read together.
That's so cool. I really look forward to rereading it. Yeah, it's interesting. So we were talking very early in the chat about falling in love with this series because Angela and I are very, I think, unusual in the fact that we loved Gardens of the Moon right off the bat. I don't think that that's the most popular opinion. And, and it's a little more popular to fall in love with the series at Dead House Gates as you did, Matt, right?
No, I wouldn't say that, but I DNF'd Gardens of the Moon, like I said, over a 12-year period twice. And then I got into it. And now that I've read it twice, on the second read, I loved Gardens of the Moon.
That's awesome. Yay.
On the first one, I was that kind of constant feeling of a little bit of confusion and think I'm missing something and whatever. But on the second read, I loved it.
Yeah. Oh, yay. Kevin also loved it. That makes me excited. Yeah. I'm really excited. Anytime I hear about a new Malazan journey, and I know that Kyle's reading it with Bookborn, so I cannot wait to see what they're going to think about it. I'm super excited about that. My opinion on Malazan is that the story is great, but I find Ericsson's writing style an utterly massive chore. I often joke it would have been better if it were written by zombie Robert Jordan.
Heresy.
Yeah. And then there's Jimmy who loved every single book. Yeah, he liked every single book. Yeah, I liked every single book. I think I did struggle though with Dead House Gates. And then the other thing too, though,
because of the writing or because of the characters and the themes.
I think it was more just it was a different setting, and I wasn't connecting to this. It was very slow moving for me at the time. I just wasn't expecting the change in pace, the change in story beats, and the setting and the different. I didn't really. I know this is like the most unpopular Malazan opinion I could possibly have. I did not connect to Mappo and Icarium in Dead House Gates. I did.
Oh man!
I did not connect to them. I know
our friendship is over.
And I might have, yeah, just not been
You
crazy
didn't
about
like
them.
you didn't like a
Yeah.
Karima Mappa.
I did eventually, but
Okay. Okay, that's all right. It's excusable if you eventually learn to love them.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
but I
can't
mean, they're
remember-
not introduced as really lovable straight away. No, that's one thing. And the other thing is,
Yeah.
I think we love them because of this tragic kind like combination. Mappo who treks along with Icarium to kind of prevent more bad stuff happening, and we kind of like find out a little bit then about Icarium as well, but it
no
takes a
spoilers,
while, I
though.
think.
No spoilers, though. Since some
Yeah,
people,
let's stay away from spoilers.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry, but yeah, so
Kyle,
yeah.
Kyle, your favorite before the Bone Hunters will be the Bridge Burners.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the important question is where Joanna stands on Krupp.
Indeed.
Team Krupp.
Oh,
Yes,
Team Krupp.
Yes.
I did not like Krupp at first. I'll be honest. Even though I loved Gardens of the Moon, I was not crazy about Krupp. And then I think what changed it, and I can't give this away because of spoilers, there was something that almost happened to Krupp in Memories of Ice, and that's when I suddenly realized I cared about him. That's all I'll say. You probably can guess what scene I'm talking about.
I know exactly which scene you're talking about.
Yeah.
I got worried, and I thought, "Oh no, I'm worried." I'm like, "Wait, I think I
I'm
care about
actually
this
worried
guy."
about Krupp's safety.
Yeah. But
Mhm.
at first I was like, "Who is this weird person?"
When that happened, I put down the book and I was like, "What the fuck is Krupp? What
Yeah.
is he?"
I thought he was some. I did get the impression in book 1 that there was something very special and different and weird about him, but
Yeah, but
I
he's
just
unique
didn't
in
know
the
that
entire
was-
series.
yeah.
He's
There's a
unique in
lot.
the entire series.
Yeah,
He's
he
the
is
only
unique.
character. I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler to say this. He's the only character in the entire series where it's never clear what he is.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
Like everybody else, it's like, yeah, this guy's a mage and this guy's a warrior and this guy's a god and whatever. But Krupp, it's like,
Oh, we're totally spoiling it. I hope we're not.
No,
I
we're
don't think
not.
we are. I don't think
No,
we're
we're
spoiling.
not.
No, we're not.
Now, there are some people who say you can't spoil Malazan, and I totally disagree with that. I do
There are
agree
certain
that
things you can definitely spoil.
yeah, there are
Yeah.
things you can spoil. Yeah,
Yeah.
there are definitely things you could spoil.
Yeah.
And at
Yeah.
the same time, it's obviously good enough that everybody loves it even more on reread. But yeah, we know you're playing, but just have to share that.
Yeah.
I was never at least worried about Krupp's safety. I think if the world explodes, he'll be hanging like a cockroach. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That is so
Krupp
funny.
is hungry for pastries.
Yeah, all this Krupp talk. Yeah, it's interesting because I know a lot of people are always saying, and I think you and I talked about this possibly, Matt, but they're always saying, just suspend your judgment till you read the first 3 books. And I always, I would say differently than that. I would say if you at least liked Gardens of the Moon and at least liked Dead House Gates, even if you weren't so hot on one of those 2, but if you at least liked one of those 2, then go on and read Memories of Ice. And then if you don't love Memories of Ice, then maybe it's not the series for you. But if you do love Memories of Ice, it is probably.
Yeah,
what
I
I-
would say like if you really don't like Gardens of the Moon, then obviously you shouldn't continue.
Really,
Right,
just
because-
that part, yeah.
Yeah, because if you don't like Gardens of the Moon, you're probably not going to like anything else either, because the reasons probably why you didn't like Gardens of the Moon, they continue,
Mm,
and for a lot of people it just gets worse because you read the first book and you're like, oh, this place is cool, these people are cool, and then you start the next book and it's like those people are gone, that place is gone,
I was
you're
so
in a
bad.
new place with new people.
Yeah.
The first time I read Midnight Tides, I was cursing Erickson's name
I think I did too. No,
for
I'm
like
kidding.
a third of the book. I was just like, you can go straight to hell. What the fuck are you doing to me? I've read your 4 books And in the 5th one, you're going to give me a totally new place and totally new characters and no connection at all to
Yeah.
all of what I just read. Really.
But
I
he
was-
does. I mean, there is a connection for sure.
The connection is there, but it's
Yeah.
like it's later. And when you start
Sort of.
Midnight Tides, it's like, oh
Sort of.
God.
There is a character you're introduced to in book 4 that is prominent in Midnight Tides. And so you get to understand more about their backstory.
But
And
not
it's-
much.
No, that's true. No, you're absolutely right. I felt that way when I opened up Memories of Ice and I saw the cast list. And I was like, what? Again? I already got used to it in book 2. I was like, okay, but I thought book 3 for sure, I'm going to have some familiarity now. What? Who are all these people? Yeah, it was crazy.
It's I think
Gets
it's
even worse
important-
when you throw in Esselmont as well.
Ugh.
I think it's important to know going into the Malazan Book of the Fallen that it is one book, right? Like
Yeah.
if you look at it as one book, the connections, the characters, the places, the events, and whatever that come up in any book will be connected to. You know,
Yeah.
like it might be in 2 books, it might be in 4 books, but the connections are all there. You just have to
Mhm.
get to them.
They are all there. They all
Yeah.
are there. And it's interesting because how different it's so interesting because with this series, I know that when I was reading it, I'd always hear people say, oh yeah, don't, and I know and everybody's different about this. Like, you don't have to work so hard, just go with the flow, you know, don't worry about trying to understand everything. And I didn't try to understand everything, but at the same time, it was hard sometimes for me to just surrender to the experience, so to speak. Now that I've finished the 10 books, I can understand that perspective. Like now it's like, okay, I get that in a way.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
but it was almost impossible, no matter how much you hear that advice. As a first-time reader, it was almost impossible for me to totally do that. I don't know if that makes sense.
I totally understand people being intimidated by it. It's a really big series. The prose is more challenging than a lot of fantasy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that what he's doing is he's subverting all of your expectations constantly, and he's
Yeah.
turning over all of the tropes. You know, like that is uncomfortable for a lot of people because they're so used to the expectations being fulfilled and the tropes being the tropes. You know.
Yeah. It's
So,
kind of
yeah.
interesting. And I've actually been curious to ask both of you because I know that Matt, you said on Philip's channel that when you got back to Gardens of the Moon the last time that you read it, that you suddenly had a light bulb moment. You're like, he's doing something totally different with the fantasy genre. And that was what clicked for you, is that he wasn't doing the same formulaic thing that we've seen in so much fantasy. And that was something that really excited you in a way, intrigued you anyway. And with Angela, I'd be curious for you, because obviously you're very well read in fantasy, but you're also very well read in a lot of literature and a lot of literary fiction too. And I know that Raph has often said that people who've read a lot of literary fiction tend to be a good audience for Malazan because you're reading in a different way. You're not reading for the same because when you read a lot of fantasy, you orient yourself in the story through those conventions. You orient yourself in the story through the found family, through the chosen one, through the magic system, and through these like various things that you don't even think about after a while. And so Malazan doesn't do that. So I'm just curious, like, were those things that appealed to just hearing your perspectives on that, because I hear that I've heard people say, I want to read Malazan, but I want to get some other fantasy behind me first before I approach it. And
yeah, I mean, I heard before I picked Malazan up a lot about how complex and complicated it is and how different it is. And I was thinking to myself, I think Philip also in this video that I mentioned earlier mentioned something as well, that it's a very complex, complicated thing. And I was thinking then to myself, okay, that guy has a PhD in literature, so it's in some way my academic peer. If he says it's very complex, how complex are we talking here? No, is it worse than, let's say, I don't know, Finnegan's Wake or something like that? So when I actually read it, I didn't find it that awfully complex. But then, as you said, I'm not a typical reader as such. No, I'm not somebody who just comes from a fantasy genre or just comes from a literary genre. But I think in general, people who have read at least some literary fiction might have a little bit of an advantage, because some of the techniques that Erikson uses are more common in literary fiction. So that at least you have seen them or read them in some form. No? What I really find compelling and why I'm reading on as well is, yeah, the overall structure. I find it absolutely fascinating to see how those individual parts click into place. No? Also, this whole thing, what he does with those prologues and with the epitaphs and the poems, no? How they are then connected to the main text and things like that. So I personally get a lot of mileage out of that. But I also understand that there are readers who say, that's doing nothing for me, and I rather skip the prologues or I skip the poems. I mean, yeah, I know I wouldn't advise it either, but I can understand that people say that, no? And say this is not my thing. Ultimately, I think probably we each have to find our own way how we want to relate to this massive text. No, I mean, how many million words? 3 million words, 4 million words,
3.2 million. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't expect to like everything. No, in a vast text like this, I don't expect to understand everything necessarily in such a vast text. So I think you need, as a Malazan reader, one probably needs a little bit of, how shall I say? Yeah, resilience, and also being able to withstand a bit of this uncertainty. If you're not good with uncertainty, if that is something that really kind of like drives you up the wall, then Malazan is probably not a text that you will enjoy.
Oh yeah, and that's even a big theme in the series, is our relationships to uncertainty. So
I would say, just so nobody in the chat gets really, really intimidated, I massively love Malazan, and I have an undergraduate degree in design, right?
Yes, I don't think
smart.
it's necessary to have a degree in anything to read Malazan.
Exactly.
No? It's just that because I'm not that typical reader anymore. No? So I think I'm not the right person to ask when it comes to how complex is this or how difficult is this, because I can't assess this really anymore. No? Because I could imagine somebody, let's say your reading experience, especially for fantasy, is well, you've grown up with Brandon Sanderson and Harry Potter, and you might have read some Cassandra Clare and Lord of the Rings, and then you read Malazan. Now, I can imagine it's like if somebody just clobbered you with a hammer. Whereas I don't have that experience anymore, because
funny.
And you can't go back. No, this is the thing. AP made actually a very similar comment. Now, he said, if you want to spoil your reading experience, do a PhD in literature, no? Because you will never go back to this, almost innocence of seeing a text, no? Because all the theory and all that stuff kind of like starts creeping in. No, so we can't go back. We can't unlearn this. We can't just say, let's ignore this. No. Unless I might get something like a brain aneurysm and my brain suddenly kind of like doesn't remember anymore, then maybe. But no, it's just...
You can't turn off the analytical part of your brain. And thank you, Von Roycroft. I'm sure you're probably gone by now, but I just wanted to say goodbye to you really quickly.
So I think I'm totally the wrong person to ask if somebody wants to know, how difficult is Malazan, or is this the book for me? You know, because I can't assess this on that level.
It occurred to me at some point to recommend to people reading it for the first time to read it as if it was a mystery novel.
Yeah, that could work.
Right?
Actually.
Because I mean, a mystery novel, the whole idea is you're not going to know what is really going on until the end. You know, and I think if you can be okay with that kind of uncertainty in a mystery novel, then why can't you be okay with that kind of uncertainty in a fantasy novel that is mysterious, where there's a lot of stuff that isn't explained.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but I think in fantasy we're used to having our hands held and kind of being spoon-fed all the exposition stuff in a lot of it, and it don't do that.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
No, it don't do that. But also, it's the way how fantasy developed as well. No, it developed very much as this genre that looks at this war about good and evil. Now, where there are clear sides. No, so
Yes.
you have
Oh, good
this
point.
expectation then as a reader, no, that you want this. And Melassen, like Matt says, Melassen doesn't do that. No.
I curse Erickson over and over and over again through the books, because I just get settled into loving or hating someone, and then he shows you a side that is unlovable in the lovable characters and that is understandable in the hateable characters. And I'm just like, I've been waiting for someone to stab that guy in the face, and you just made me sympathize with them.
And apparently Esselmont does the same thing, because every time we had a chat over on Jimmy's channel about one of the books, Philip we would say, "Oh, I hate that character," and then Philip said, "Well, if you read the novels of the Malazan Empire," he said that so many times, and we were like, "What? How can we sympathize with this character?" He's like, "You just have to read Esselmont's books." I'm like, "Dang it!" Yeah, you can't really land in certainty with anything, and I think. For me too, I think one thing that I would say, if I were to chime in with this, because I did have some struggle orienting with what was going on when I was reading Dead House Gates. I think that was kind of part of the challenge too, was like understanding what Erickson was doing. Because I don't know, whereas I found it really wonderful and new and wondrous for me, I guess I should say, in Gardens of the Moon, it was difficult for me in Dead House Gates for some reason. For some reason, I did find myself like thinking, what is this doing? And I think what really helped me, and this is going to sound very generic to say this, but probably coming from me, but when I heard that it's more, when I think it was because Andy Smith said, if you think of this series more as a theme-based series than as even a character-driven series or a, what's the other word, plot-driven series. If you think about it more, like, not that those things aren't there and not interesting, because they are there and they are interesting, but if you think about it more for the themes, then like that clicked for me. The second I understood that, and I feel like there is more attention to that these days in fantasy booktube. I don't think there used to be a few years ago.
Yeah.
A few years ago, before Philip started his channel, really, most of the videos I found on Fantasy BookTube were just about characters and just about plot and just about world building and magic. I never heard any conversation about themes. And so nowadays you hear a lot about themes, but it's really, it really helped me to orient in the story when I thought, okay, what are the themes? And how do you figure out what the themes are? Well, what are the conflicts the characters are going through? And even if you can't remember every single character or follow, you can definitely see their struggles. They are there. And I feel like for me, that helped me relate to the series. So that was kind of what I grasped onto.
And in a way, he's signaling very clearly these books are about themes, because every single book, he takes the plot away from you and he takes the characters away from you.
Oh, that's so true.
And he presents you with new themes. And then you get characters and story, but by the end of it, sorry, next book, new themes, different characters, different story. And I mean, the stories and the characters all come together.
Yeah.
But like the experience of reading Malazan is, oh, okay, new characters, new story. Oh, okay.
But I mean, there are really memorable characters as well, no?
Totally.
Already couple.
Oh,
It's
some of
not
my
as if
favorite characters
the characters are
ever
kind of like come and go, and you do not attach to them or anything like that. No.
No. I mean,
So-
it's almost provocative. He's almost provoking you, because I get attached to a lot of the characters, quite a lot.
Yeah.
Me too.
And then the next book, they're gone.
Yeah.
And then the book after that, they're back, maybe not.
Maybe not.
And then they're gone. And then they're back. It's like he's not allowing you to just have a cozy fellowship.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No cozy fellowship.
No.
So true.
No, there's
No,
no fucking
no.
cozy fellowship. It's
No.
like, you like this character? Sorry, they're dead. You like this character? Sorry, they're not in the next book. You like this
Yeah.
character? Yeah, sorry, they died and they were resurrected and now they're totally different or whatever, it's just
Yeah, you like this
Yeah.
character? Sorry, because they're really the badass here. You thought they're the
Exactly.
good ones?
exactly.
Yeah.
I made
Yeah.
It is
I actually
fascinating.
I actually just recorded a favorite Malazan characters only in the first 3 books.
Okay.
And video and not favorite, but I was giving like character awards, like the Academy Awards, and it was really hard. I could only find one that I could just, in the first 3 books anyway, that I could just without reservation hate. Only one.
Yeah.
That's
Like-
good going, I have to say. No, I mean,
There were a lot of bad people, but you always get a little insight into who they are and why they are like they are. And Malik Rel was the only one where I could say, stab Malik Rel in the face as soon as possible, please. I'm assuming that in Esselmont's books, Malik Rel appears and we understand that his
probably.
father abused him or who knows what.
I
And
think that's probably the case. Yeah.
Yeah. yeah, I'm
I
just
haven't read
assuming.
it, but I'm assuming. Yeah.
I'm just assuming because they don't let you just love or hate a character.
no.
Like so many characters start out and you're like, oh my God, this guy's a demon. And then after a couple of books, you're cheering for them. Witness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Witness.
Mm,
It's so different. Like I always say, like with the Song of Ice and Fire, Martin gets you to hate characters, but then he makes you feel like they're almost redeemed by creating more characters that are even more detestable in contrast. Whereas I think with the Malazan, it's like he takes a detestable character and then he takes a character that you think you're rooting for, but then he shows you the flip side of even the character you're rooting for, and then the flip side of the character you think you're against. And so he does it in kind of a different way.
the dinner in Gardens of the Moon.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, good case. Exactly.
2 characters, good guy, bad guy. By the end of it, flipped.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Yeah.
oh damn. Yeah. And that like shows you really early on, this is what the book's going to be like. It's
Yeah.
he's not hiding any of those tricks. It's all the way through.
Paramita says if you skim battle scenes in other books, oh no, the battle scenes in Malazan are so good.
yeah.
Sorry, Malazan is not for you, in my opinion. The military focus for pages completely derails my reading. Yeah, it's interesting because I can understand if you're not into military fantasy because it's a very military focused type of series in some ways. It's not the only thing, but I have to say I am pretty picky about battle scenes. I don't love battle scenes just because there's a battle scene, but man, the way Erickson does battle scenes, if I'm not immersed, I don't know what I am because it's just otherworldly. It's cinematic. It's incredible.
And it's always like all of his battle scenes have not only, but continually through the battle scenes, they have connections to the characters.
Yes.
Like you're
And they have an
getting
arc.
the battle scene through a
Mhm.
character, through multiple characters maybe, but it's not just like big abstract pieces moving on a table or something. It's like right there with the people,
Yeah, and he also incorporates elements in the atmosphere and perspective and sky. I love that, and other type. Just he kind of varies things, so I appreciate that.
When I was in university, I used to do recreation historical sword fighting, and
Oh, cool.
I was actually in a battle with 2,500 people once, and like some of the experience, I mean, it's totally different than being a real soldier. Obviously, I'm not saying in any way that I have any idea or experience in what that's like, but being on a field with a heavy sword in your hand, wearing armor, I've done that. And having a guy right next to you on either side and 5 rows of guys behind you, and they're pushing you forward and the enemy standing over there and all of that. I've done something like that. Obviously I wasn't fearing for my life, but a lot of the experiences he describes in battle scenes, I was like, I can relate to that a little bit, you know. I've got
That's
a
cool.
little bit of a feeling of what that's like, you know. So he's
I believe Erickson was a fencer too for a while
Yeah.
there. So he does
absolutely
have-
and greatly inspired by Glenn Cook, who wrote The Black Company, who was a Vietnam veteran.
Hmm.
Yeah, actually, that's also one of the read-alongs I'm doing. Tori from Tori Talks, and
Oh, yeah.
I are going to read The Things They Carried, which is actually a short story collection by a Vietnam veteran, which apparently I think inspired Glenn Cook to write the Black Company. And then we're going to read the first book of the Black Company together, both of those in January. So
Oh, that's awesome. That
that'll be
sounds
fun.
so fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're not doing a lot of rereads. Or have you reread? Or have you read that before?
Black Company is a reread for me.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I read. I don't think I read all of them because I read them too fast and I got a bit burned out on Black Company. But I think I read
Yeah.
5 or 6 of them, but like
Yeah.
10 years ago, and my memory sucks. So
Yeah.
I probably don't remember that much about them.
And here we have my advice is 1 Malazan chapter a day, not counting prologue and epilogue. I would double, triple up on those as necessary, then read something else and think about it till the next day.
Or not read something else and think about it till the next day.
Yeah. I need to read the Esselmont. I one of my goals, though December is already, it already feels like it's slipped away. But one of my goals was to read Night of Knives before the end of the year. I don't know that I can do it, but I have a feeling I would like Esselmont's writing style a lot better, but I basically have Malazan PTSD. So no, I hope you recover from that.
Speaking of PTSD, PTSD is a theme in the Malazan Book of the Fallen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trauma is explored in so many different ways in that series.
But
And by the
specifically
way-
like PTSD with like soldiers who've just been fighting for too long. you know.
Yeah. And by the way, I've heard a rumor, Angela, that you're going to be
Mhm.
doing a discussion of some sort about violence and the role of violence in fantasy.
Yeah. It has to be postponed because I'm battling some tech issues here. I'm sitting here with borrowed gear to do this here. So I'm planning some type of discussion about violence or the role of violence in fantasy literature. And one confirmed participant will be Philip Chase. So
Yeah.
something to look forward to.
I'm excited to watch that because I think that's going to be a fantastic discussion. I personally think that violence has a place in fantasy literature. I'll just say that now. But I'm sure there's a lot of nuance.
Yeah, we probably all say that, no, but there are still a lot of questions of how it's handled, how much is too much, no, stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely something worth talking about.
Oh yeah, because then we were getting into censorship questions.
Yeah. So
I've been thinking a lot lately about, because for me, I'm basically Philip Chase but dumber, right? Like
you have a gray beard.
I've got a gray beard, but when I hear him talk about, like when he said Tolkien baptized my imagination, Malazan set it free, I was like, yeah, of course. You know, like his reading history, a lot of it is very, very similar to mine. And I grew up on Tolkien. I read Tolkien when I was 9. I reread it again immediately. Like Tolkien was the thing forever until I got to Malazan. And then I was like, if I ever do a top 10 video, Tolkien's not going to be number 1 anymore.
No.
But reading Malazan, I've been thinking about the don't even think about it slaughter of orcs in Tolkien. Like it's just like the entire race is evil and they must be killed, all of them, you know. And that now, back then I was just like, yeah, kill the orcs, you know. But now I'm like, that's a little uncomfortable. That's like genocide, more or less. Is that really cool? Maybe.
Yeah, this is the other thing. I thought over a lifetime, how we relate to violence in books, and not just fantasy books. No, it's not just fantasy books where you have violent stuff occurring. It's just that we, with our channels, are specializing in this. But that over lifetime, this can change, of course. Now, how you relate to that.
Well, and the thing that I think I don't think for me at least, what I've been thinking is the violence isn't the point. The point is, do you have a world where absolute good and evil exist? Right? Tolkien did. Tolkien had a world where there was absolute evil. So of course it's okay to kill absolute evil things if you're absolute good. But like Malazan doesn't even come close to having a concept of absolute good and evil.
Not anymore, no. Yeah.
So there's always a question of, should we be killing these people or creatures or things or whatever? And usually you're just doing it for self-protection, but you're not doing it because you're absolutely good and right, and those are absolutely evil and wrong, you know? And for Tolkien, it was a lot simpler.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that is, I think, where, you know, the separation between art and artist can come in a little bit, because, you know, I mean, he was clearly Catholic. That's going to play a role in his view. He probably projected that somewhat, at least. I know he was always quoted as saying it's not allegorical, but
it's bullshit. I mean, it's not necessarily allegorical, but it is 100% based on his religious beliefs.
There is influence there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he had a fundamental belief in evil existing and good existing. Right. And that is the book. That's the whole point of the book. That's what the whole book is about, you know, is trying to destroy evil. Yeah, but I mean,
it's still a bit sophisticated insofar as it's not like a lot of fantasy. Then after as well, what they're doing, you go on to this quest to find the object that then will help you. No, here the quest is that it has to culminate in the sacrifice of letting go of the object. No, that's I think it's a little bit more sophisticated than a lot of fantasies is. No, which probably makes it that classic. Not that we still read it, that we still talk about it.
I mean, in the end, the things that are evil for Tolkien are greed and pride. Those are the most evil behaviors, you know.
Yeah, and this is what Johannes says. No? He's Catholic, no? So the cardinal sins are up there, no? Yeah.
Oh, I love that you're tackling this topic, Angela, and I think it's interesting too, because you are a visual artist, and I'm sure that these topics have to be addressed in art as well, right?
Like, oh yeah, I mean, whole genre battle scenes, no?
Yeah.
So
wow, I'm really excited
about the 18th century onwards, no, where you have or even further back, Bayeux Tapestry, no, it's one big battle scene.
Yeah.
So
I feel kind of like this is where I feel kind of like a bad person, though, because I honestly, like on the one hand, I actually really enjoy battle scenes, and I don't know if that's like, that makes me a bad person. Does that make me a bad person? I don't know.
No, I don't think it makes us a bad person if we enjoy this. But I think when we say we enjoy this, then we probably have phases where we do reflect upon this and reflect upon what did we actually enjoy there, no? Like Matt said earlier, no? So you might still enjoy Lord of the Rings, but you also might have this kind of like aha moment where you say, oh, did I just read a whole genocide sequence and was totally okay with that, no? And I think this is perhaps one of the functions, no, to make us think, to make us question, what are we okay with and what are we not okay with and why?
I think that's always the fear and the danger, and I think it's just part of our, I don't know, something in our human nature. I'm not going to say it's natural. I don't know, maybe it is. I can't really say one way or the other, but I can say that, like, there can be things that go pretty far, and that could be even very triggering for some people to read about and very uncomfortable. And for some people, that just crosses the line. And for other people, they could read that same thing and find that like almost intoxicating. You know what I mean? Like get some kind of fascination experience with that. And I don't know. I don't have an answer to that.
I think the interesting thing for battle, I love battle scenes as well. So if you're a
Mhm.
horrible person, Joanna, so am I. We can be horrible together. But
Yay.
the thing I've started thinking more and more, because I come from this historical, even like Le Morte d'Arthur, yeah, the really old school fantasy, that there are heroes who are doing the right thing, and they're trying to stop evil people or evil creatures or whatever, you know, and it's all about heroism and protection, and essentially like the idea of Lord of the Rings is keeping the good, right? The good is dying in the world. That's the third age of Middle Earth. That's the whole idea of the third age of Middle Earth. Everything good is dying in the world. And it's some of it's dying naturally. Like the elves are just fading. They're not fading because of specific, you know, because there's orcs. They're just fading. So they have to go into the West. But overall, the world, the magic in the world is dying. The good in the world is dying. And I like stories of heroes trying to protect the good and save the good. But I've gotten more to the point where I don't really want, or I don't really care about any kind of idea of absolute good or evil. Like the Chain of Dogs for me was a lot more touching because it was normal people who were...
No spoilers.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into details, but it was normal people who were basically victims being hunted by people who just wanted to kill them, you know, and neither side was really good or evil, but the idea of protecting those helpless people to me seemed like a good thing, not absolute good, but a good thing. And then fighting the enemy to protect those people is a good thing. Yeah. And then I enjoy those battles, and I'm cheering for Coltane and his buddies. Yeah. So I want them to persevere, and I want them to win. And, you know, I'm not enjoying like the descriptions of, you know, the blood, the river running red, and, you know, which axe went through which head and all of that sort of stuff. That's not so much the point, but like exciting action is always exciting. And I'm totally on the edge of my seat wanting the people who are protecting someone to win, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I've done 2 videos. Kind of one was on the cost of mercy in Malazan, no? Which describes a little bit what Matt just said there as well about, that we might think this is a merciful act or this is a good act, and then we find out later the costs might have been much, much bigger than the mercy that the act perhaps might have bestowed, no? And I also did a video about how the Malazan violence affects me personally. So that's a bit more personal video. But there I used the concept by a psychologist called John Emmerich, who has written a book on challenging behavior. So violence, of course, is a challenging behavior. And basically he says that it depends on, how shall I say, the context, the social context, the historical context, the cultural context in which the behavior takes place. So I would almost say kind of behavior without context is meaningless. So if we don't have a context for what's going on, then we cannot ascribe any meaning to that type of behavior. And that probably will go also for violence. And we all bring our own cultural, historical, socio-economic context with us when we read those books. And I think this is perhaps one of those things that Malazan does in a very exemplary way, that it questions or makes us question our own context that we carry with us and that we bring towards the book to then, engage in this sense-making act and try to kind of like ascribe meaning to certain behaviors that are described in the book. And the other thing is that Malazan, well, I would say it's an invitation to a journey of self-discovery. How far we take this up is up to each individual reader. No? Do I want this or don't I want this? But I think I ended this video by saying that that we might find that the biggest monsters are actually inside and not in the book itself. No? If we take up that invitation.
Malazan, more than any fantasy I've ever read, has made me think really hard about some difficult and sometimes ugly subjects.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, that's something I've said too. Is like with this series, is like there are some beautiful moments of connection in Malazan. Just absolutely gorgeous friendships and beautiful moments. But at the same time, the series has made me look at some pretty dark parts inside of myself that I was not expecting. Yeah. And I think that could be a powerful role of literature to get us to challenge our beliefs or challenge ourselves and, those contexts which you were talking about. So
most of the beautiful friendships in Malazan, both of them are murderers.
That's a good point.
Right?
Yeah.
Pretty much all of them are totally willing to kill certain people like that.
Yeah. I think about things like that, though. I mean, kind of the reverse, though. Like, I think about people you might judge for their political beliefs, or, maybe they have some really toxic, what we'd consider toxic social beliefs or things like that. But what if that's the person that's the doctor in the ER who saves your mom in an accident? Like you never, it's not always so simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not always so simple.
Also, when you said like, am I a bad person when I say enjoy this? I think we should ban the word enjoy from BookTube. I think it's really overused, especially for, let's say, the more grimmer and darker forms of fantasy. No? I think we really need to assess how we talk about some things as well. No, I've started to, instead of saying I enjoy something, I tend more now to say I value a certain scene or I value a theme in a book than saying I enjoy it necessarily, because I think it doesn't really describe what's happening for me when I say I enjoy reading, a murder scene or a torture scene or whatever. No?
Yeah, when I say enjoy, I don't know. There's so many different experiences. I don't want to reduce what I'm meaning by it, but I understand what you mean. And actually, I ran into that same complication. I don't know if you watched it was full of spoilers, so it's okay if you didn't, but we had a discussion on The Darkness That Comes Before by R. Scott Baker.
I watched actually the whole video, even so I haven't read The Darkness That Comes Before.
Oh, goodness. I struggled. It was so funny because there was a point, I think, in our discussion where I'm saying, I struggle saying I enjoyed this. But I really felt I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, it was absolutely compelling. It was absolutely captivating. It had me at every page. It had me wanting to return and read on. But man, I cannot say comfortably, I enjoyed it with the joy part of the word. And I can't even recommend it, even though I really, it's hard. It's hard because I know that there's I even got an invitation to participate in will you share your favorite book of the year? And I'm like, but was this a favorite? And if I'm saying it's a favorite, am I recommending it? And you know what I mean? It's like that BookTube culture that it does. I run into a wall with it, with a lot of things that I appreciate in literature.
I object to the idea of not using the word enjoy.
Well, I wouldn't say not, but I mean it's used sometimes.
I think it's important to explain why you enjoyed it. Put your enjoyment in put your enjoyment in context, because I mean sometimes I don't think I would ever review a Malazan book and just say I enjoyed it. You know, I do enjoy all of them, but that's like almost saying nothing. It makes it sound like a beach read, you know. And some books are beach reads. Some books are beach reads, and that's fine. You know,
Yeah.
I also read things sometimes just because I want entertainment, and that's
Right,
it. And
yeah.
I don't want to think very hard because I've been reading Malazan, you know.
Yeah.
Which is why I have this rhythm with like Malazan, non-Malazan, Malazan, non-Malazan. I read a Discworld novel recently in between two Malazan books, and that was a change of pace. But yeah, like explaining why you enjoy it, I think is important, and not just saying you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Like that's a bit flat. But I do enjoy battle scenes, and I'm not ashamed to say it.
Yeah, okay.
If they're well written, you know, if they're well written,
Yeah.
and if they're mostly focused on the characters, because, and I mean, at the same time that I enjoy it because it's action, it's adventurous, and all of that. It's also, if it's well written and it's even slightly realistic, it's horrific. Yeah, I mean, like being in a battle is not heroic. It's not glorious. It's pretty disgusting and horrible and terrifying, you know. And I can enjoy how an author can transmit that. You know, it can give me that feeling, and I think Erikson does it really well. Especially like Chain of Dogs, like every battle there, I was just like, oh fuck, this is horrible. Like, what's gonna happen? Everyone's gonna die. This is so horrible. And I enjoy how he gave me that feeling. How he, I mean, like you almost asked me earlier, and I think I interrupted you, Joanna. Why read? And for me, it's mostly two things, especially why read fantasy. It's imagination. I think when you're reading fantasy, you're exercising your imagination muscles, right? And a lot of people in our society don't do that very often. You know, they get in sort of a gray sort of grind, and they're not really putting their mind into something imaginative very often. And for me, that's why I love science fiction and fantasy, is it's just like it keeps my imagination active and working. But the other thing is empathy. Like a good writer can put me in the position of a character. You know, they can give me an experience that I've never had before. They can put me in the middle of a battle, which is terrifying and horrific, and I feel terrified and horrified, you know? And to me, that's like broadening my experience of humanity. Like it's making me a bigger human in a way. Because I get that little feeling of something that I will hopefully never experience, but I can have at least a little taste of, I kind of maybe get what that's like a little bit, just a little bit. And that empathy, I mean, that's a lot of the reason I read as well. So, and I enjoy learning through that emotional experience of empathy. So I can say I enjoy a battle scene, even though it's totally horrific. I enjoy it because I learned something somehow, you know, about what people do and people have been doing since the dawn of time, you know?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think that's still a bit different if you then talk about your experience, no?
Of course.
Qualify what
but I do enjoy
enjoyment is,
you know?
really. I also, I mean, like you, I can enjoy battle scenes. Now I've just finished the first of the Azelmont's Path of Ascendancy novels, no? And Azelmont is absolutely fantastic when it comes to not necessarily battle scenes, but hand-to-hand combat, and also kind of like martial arts inspired combat. And yeah, I can enjoy that. No? I can read this on a technical level. Now what's described, the movements that are described, even if I'm have no idea really what that is in reality, because I'm a total armchair warrior. No, but I can still say, yes, I do enjoy it on that level. I think another very important thing is that literature in general is doing for us, and fantasy literature perhaps even a little bit better than other literature, is that it provides for us cathartic moments, where
Mhm.
we get this release of emotion as well. No? So yeah.
Yes.
I also
Yeah.
just enjoy battle scenes from the point of view that I used to do 14th century fencing, and I've been on
Mm.
a sword and shield battlefield
Yeah.
recreation, and there is a skill to it. You know, there is a certain kind of prowess and
Mm.
mastery to learning how to do that, which
Yeah.
is, you know, hard work. And it's really exciting when you do it because you're worried about getting hit.
Yeah. I think
I've never been worried about getting killed, but I have been in
Yeah, but I
fights
could
where I didn't
imagine
want to
getting
get
hit
hit.
is still painful enough. No?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I used to have bruises.
I think
yeah.
that related, I think, Matt, you're helping me flesh out some of my thoughts on this, just hearing you talk about it, because I think part of what I love about battle scenes, I think what it is, I'm not totally sure. I know, you know, some of this might be subconscious with reasons why I enjoy battle scenes, but I think part of it might have to do with feeling vulnerable. I love and going to empathy, like the feeling of vulnerability that you get in a battle scene, and also just feeling really small. There's something that's sublime about feeling very small in a world that's very chaotic and where a lot of things are happening and anything can happen. So there's something about that experience that I just greatly appreciate when authors can evoke that in me. So I think that's
Not
part of
only
what I
feeling small, but like having been on a recreation battlefield once with 2,500 people, you feel really small because you're one and there's 2,499 more people there, but also feeling part of something larger. You know,
yes.
like
Yes.
there was such a feeling, and I mean it's a recreation battle. Yeah, nobody, like, the worst that might happen is someone might break something, but mostly it's just bruises. No one's going to die. But there was still, because you're all standing there and it's sunny, so you're sweating and you're wearing all this fucking heavy armor and everything's heavy and you're exhausted and whatever. But then you look around and you're like, yeah, but we're a thing together. And those guys
Yes.
over there, they're not us, you know? And it's a really basic human feeling. It's not a very civilized human feeling. It's not a very cultured or educated human feeling, but it's a very basic human feeling. And it's probably the
I know
basic human
exactly.
feeling that
Yes.
causes all problems in humanity, us and them. But
Oh, yeah.
you feel it so viscerally when you're in a situation like that, because you're like theoretically, it's only a recreation battle, but the idea is if we stick together, they die and we don't. You know, and that's a really, really basic human kind of feeling. And it's very, in a way, it's very inspiring. You know, it's not very cool to say that these days, you know, because
No,
everybody
you're
thinks
right.
we're past violence and all of that. But it's
I think that there's a shadow side to it. There is that though. There
yeah,
is that. And I
yeah.
totally agree with you. I think that's also why I don't really get as deeply into one-on-one combat. I'm still suspending my judgment, hoping to love Esselmon's approach to that. But for some reason, that just doesn't quite excite me as much. But I think you're right. There is that emotional contagion that sweeps over the masses of people and the feeling of unity and call to action together. And at the same time, there is a, you know, I mean, we can't deny there is a dark side to that. There is a mob mentality. There is that,
Totally.
you know, there are horrible things that happen in war when people feel like I'm entitled to my spoils of war and all of that. I think Baker actually points a critical eye at some of that too. Honestly, with the
That's
holy
the big thing. That's the big thing you learn from fighting as well is battles, like proper battles with thousands of people, have almost zero to do with skill. Right? A one-on-one combat is 100% skill.
You should read
Like,
Baker.
are you better than the guy you're fighting? That's one-on-one combat. But in a mass battle, there is so little you can do, no matter how good you are. because you're
Mhm.
you're crowded, you're being pushed, you're being knocked over by other people. You're lucky if you can hang on to your weapons and your shield and everything, and you're lucky if you can get the space to try and hit the guy in front of you. You know, it's nothing to do with skill.
Wow. I just based on
The guy
that.
who trained me in sword fighting,
Uh-huh.
he was very good. I was not very good, but he was very good. He was standing 2 guys over from me in this huge battle, and he went down the first time we got anywhere near the enemy.
What?
Wow.
Yeah, just because like you can't do much. You know, he was trying to get out there, but someone was blocking his arm and whatever, and he got hit in the head and he was out.
Oh, wow.
And I
Wow.
stayed a lot longer, although I wasn't very good. So the
I think
thing in a
I
big
have-
battle is the sticking together thing, the being a unit thing is the most important, not the individual skill. And then in a one-on-one, of course, the individual skill is super important.
Yeah. And I have to admit, I do love, and I love strategy, like tactical strategy stuff. Like even what I do for fun, I didn't answer my own question. I haven't done this in a long time, but one thing I like to do for fun is play tactical RPGs, video games. And I also love a board game called Gloomhaven, and that has a lot of strategy involved. I love that kind of stuff. I don't know what it is. It's just kind of fun
What
for me.
tactical video games?
I cannot remember the names of the games.
Okay.
I have a list I've played, and I just don't. I'm terrible at remembering titles. But
Right.
I could send you. I'll send you the list later. Yeah,
I'd be
there were
interested.
so
I also play Xbox
love that. Oh,
on
cool.
and off.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna catch up on the chat really quickly here.
Yeah,
'cause
there have
I'm
been
waiting-
actually some really interesting
Yeah.
things in there. That was one I was thinking about. I forget reading by the Rainy Mountain. I forget her name. Vasha?
Varsha.
Vasha? Yeah. I
Yeah,
love
she's a
seeing someone say that they have no fantasy experience and they read Malazan and love it.
Yeah, and she has some really great analysis videos too
Absolutely.
on her
Yeah.
channel.
Absolutely.
On
Great channel.
Yeah. And then PTSD is a theme, but I really don't like Erickson's writing style. I acknowledge he's a genius, but the way he writes just seemed designed to make it a big chore for me to read as possible. I personally love Erickson's writing style. It really works for me. But I can understand that not being to everybody's taste. I mean, it is a very distinct style.
I'm pretty sure he did not write anything to specifically piss you off. But if you don't like his writing style, don't read it. You know,
Yeah.
that's totally fine, you know.
True. That's true. Okay. Well, thank you, Shadia. If you watch this later, we appreciate you in the chat. For me, an important part of writing violence well is taking the time to describe the consequences of the violence for all parties involved. Yes, I always appreciate that too. The aftermath of war is something that I think that's becoming more explored in the genre. I've noticed over the last couple of years, and I know Erickson does that too. I mean, he definitely.
I was
does
going
that
to
as
say,
well.
Highway Cavalier, have you read Malazan?
Yeah.
Because the trauma from the aftermath of violence is one of the big themes.
Huge,
Civilized
yeah.
or uncivilized? Which one are you?
Well, I think that applied a lot to what Angela was talking about with contexts and the meaning that we have to context that we don't even question sometimes. Sometimes we just think things are the way they are.
I was going to say, it's a very, very modern concept that civilized equals non-violent.
Yes.
It's a really new concept.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't think it's true myself. So I would say I'm civilized, but I believe that violence is sometimes necessary. But Lancelot was a piece of... It depends on which version you read, man.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, he did sleep with his best mate's wife.
Right.
So not so cool.
Thank you, Billy. It's so good to see you. And let's see, I enjoy battles through a book lens. Wouldn't want to be there though. That's right. I mean, that is the kind of joy about reading, is that you can experience things without really experiencing them to some extent. I've run into the same thing with Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. The protagonist is a torturer by profession, but the books are so deep and dense, so my enjoyment is fine in context. You're reading those with Philip, I hear.
I'm going to. I've read them before. It's a reread for me.
That's your reread year is just lining up perfectly for
Exactly.
you.
It totally. I mean, I'm going to miss all the new books for the next year, basically. But have either of you two read
No.
Book of the New Sun?
I want,
Oh
you know
man,
what? My friend is supposed
it's
to
so
send
good.
me. My friend has told me for the last couple months that she's going to send me the books because she no longer wants to read them. But I think she's just been busy.
Tell her to do it urgently and join Philip and I.
I'd love to. I would love to.
I'm not sure when we're starting. I mean, I think
Yeah.
last time we talked, he said early 2023. But, I
Aspirational
mean,
TBR.
yeah, exactly. His TBR is always so aspirational. It could be like April. You know, we'll see.
So I have to say, he's been so like, he's been amazing about getting things read when you have a deadline, he'll do it. I mean, he's just great that way. Maybe I shouldn't put him on the spot with that, but yeah, I do want to read Book of the New Sun, though. I've heard fantastic things about Gene Wolfe's prose, and I think it would be fun to read that with you and Philip because, and to get, especially because I hear there's a lot of, I want to say that I don't know if there's Anglo-Saxon in there or something with language.
He uses like his world, which is technically not fantasy, it's science fiction, it's far future, but it's reverted to a sort of medievalish society. He uses really old words from our world as normal words in his future world. So all of his made up words where like you read and you don't recognize the word, they're actual words from history.
Wow.
Yeah, he doesn't make up any words. They're all really old, no longer used words.
And I know Liam from Liam's Lyceum, he's in Raph's chat right now, which is going on at the same time. But yeah, he loves Book of the New Sun. I think he said that was his favorite book of the year, possibly one of his favorite books of all time. He's a huge Tolkien fan, huge language person.
Really good, but I'm basically rereading it with Philip so that I can piggyback on his much better knowledge of literature.
You want Philip as a translator.
Exactly.
Philip is wonderful for that purpose. He's wonderful for that.
Not just translating the words, but like understanding what's going
Understanding
on better than I
anything
do.
going on, yeah.
Cultural interpreter.
Exactly.
Yes, he's a good cultural interpreter.
Literature interpreter. Yeah.
For many of us, life is pretty banal. Stories allow us to live a dangerous life. Yeah, and that's the other thing with violence that I think about is, I know that I can't remember who told me this once. It's just that we live very sanitized lives. When people die, we rarely see it. It's cleaned up right away. We don't live with a lot of carnage, as even some places in the world probably still do.
Yeah.
And
I spent a lot of time in India. They deal with a lot of carnage that we do not deal with because it's in the street. I have stepped over corpses in the street in India.
Wow.
Just because that's India. So
in some ways, I feel like that's a perspective that would help us to understand other people better too. I don't know. Possibly. It's hard to say though. I know that I'm going to probably tackle this topic a little bit when I have Sarah from Sarah Reads on the channel eventually. But I really am curious about this topic of reading and empathy, because I do see reading as, I do engage empathy quite a bit when I read. And sometimes I feel like that's very effortless and the author just writes so well that it invites that experience. But at the same time, I don't necessarily side with the idea that reading automatically makes us empathetic. I think it's something that does require some agency on our part. And I say this because I hear people all the time on BookTube saying, I just didn't connect with the characters, or they'll, read a character like a certain female character in Dead House Gates and say that this person's just a whiny, annoying person, which is valid. That
was my first read. My second read was quite different, but
there is a step or level of taking some time to engage with that part of your mind, right? To put yourself in that character's perspective. And like I said, some writer, I mean, it depends on the writing too. It depends, but it's a topic I'm curious about for sure.
No.
Yeah, I'll have to put one together. I haven't played that I find them a lot of fun. When it comes to RPG stuff, I have to admit that I am kind of lame in that I'm not really big into let's go to the store and level up the helmet and the gear. And I let my husband do all that. And then I'm like, let me just play. I just want to get into it. I did used to do LARPing. I did live action role playing.
You did LARPs.
I did when I was a teenager.
Wow.
And
Okay.
and so I kind of relate to what you're talking about with your experience with the armor and the hordes of people and I can relate. I've had that experience, but with padded weapons, not real weapons. And I was pretty scared in some of those situations, but I was always somebody who never got into, I feel like I'm such a fake fantasy fan, but I never got into the actual role playing part of it. I never got into like the magic spells and now you're somebody throwing a fireball at me and that happened. I was just more into like, I just want to fight. I want to cut up people up. I don't know. I liked the action of things more.
I don't think LARPing magic is a requirement for being a fantasy fan.
Okay, good. It was how I got into fantasy in a way, though, because one of my best friends who got me into LARPing was the one who introduced me to Tolkien. But and it was like a fantasy culture in a way, because I met a whole bunch of people who loved reading fantasy, who were just into the whole activity. Some people who like to do.
So you got into LARPing without having read any fantasy.
That's right.
That is weird.
Yeah, the way that happened was because I'll tell you this when we end the podcast, because it's probably not the most something. I don't know if I should share this live, but anyway.
I mean, it's very obvious why that appealed to her. She's an assassin elf.
Well, yeah,
that had to come out. Like, I mean,
it just kind of had to happen at some point.
Yeah,
it was inevitable. I was like, I found my people. Yeah, it is a weird story. But anyway, we're going on just under 3. Is that right?
Just under 3 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And so I think this is a pretty good place to call it a chat for now. And I definitely am going to head over to Raf's chat too. He is celebrating his BookTube anniversary. So if you're here still, please go show Raf some support. And thank you so much. This has been such a fun Why Read episode. So thank you so much, Angela and Matt, for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here. It was really fabulous. Thank you for the invite.
Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.